Good afternoon and welcome to the Assembly Committee on Revenue. Will the Secretary please call the roll?
Assembly members Considine, De Silva, Flanagan, Gallant, Goulding, Gray, Hafen, Wynn, O'Neill, Roth, Chair Backus.
And I am here. Please mark Assembly members Hafen and Assembly member Wynn present when they arrive. I know we all have lots of long days, lots of long hearings. And then also please mark Assembly members Gray and Flanagan absent excused. With that, I just want to thank everyone for attending the Assembly Revenue hearing this afternoon. It's likely we will go into the evening as we have 4 bills on our agenda. We have Assembly Bill 279, revising provisions relating to tobacco. Assembly Bill 471 revises provisions governing remote sales of certain tobacco products. Assembly Bill 479, revising provisions relating to the taxation of agricultural real property, as well as Assembly Bill 536, which revises provisions relating to tobacco. And of course, we will conclude our hearing with public comment. In light of us having 4 bills set for today's agenda, I try to keep my committee not here all night, and so we try to limit each bill hearing to about an hour, but we always want to give everyone the opportunity to have a fair hearing. And so with that, what I always ask is that our Assembly members do a 15-minute presentation. We allow 10 minutes or so for questions, and then we start taking support, opposition, and neutral testimony, and we'll move through that. Usually I like to say 10 minutes, but it sometimes lasts a little longer, but we will always give equal time to both sides. So I would ask that you limit your testimony to 2 minutes if you can. Just remember there's other people that may want to give testimony in support, opposition, or in the neutral, and you may be exhausting their time. It's always appropriate. We receive lots of written testimony, and we're able to review it. We've received quite a few letters already today, and we've been trying to get those up online as well. So with that, we are planning to take the bills out of order this evening. We're going to start with Assembly Bill 479, then go to Assembly Bill 279, then Assembly Bill 536, and conclude our evening with Assembly Bill 471. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and open the hearing on Assembly Bill 479 and welcome Assembly Member Watts to present his bill.
Thank you very much, Chair, members of the committee. For the record, Howard Watts, representing Assembly District 15 in Clark County. I am glad to present Assembly Bill 479 for your consideration today. I want to provide just a little bit of background on how we got to this point and then speak to the bill as well as a proposed conceptual amendment that should be available on Nellis for you all. And then I'm glad to take any questions that the committee may have. So during the interim, the Growth and Infrastructure Committee heard about many different issues, and one thing that kind of came up repeatedly was interest in expanding the application of solar power across our state. Agrivoltaics is one of the ideas that was brought up, and put simply, it is co-locating solar photovoltaic panels on agricultural land. The idea being that you can get 2 uses out of any given parcel of land. There were some additional benefits that were thought of. So one, this can help reduce some of the demand and pressure to find raw land in order to site large-scale solar facilities. 2, you have the opportunity, depending on what you're doing, to help still maintain agricultural production, but also reduce the water use, maybe by changing some of the crops that are being grown on that land. So this can help in some of our water-stressed areas, of which we know there are several in the state, while maintaining that agricultural character of the land and of the communities. And then finally, it can also provide alternative revenue streams for private landowners who are engaged in agriculture. So we wanted to figure out what we could do to support that. We were hoping that we would be able to put some money aside and fund a pilot program. I don't think that's going to happen this time. So that is not in this bill. But ultimately what we wanted to do was define what this concept is, and then figure out some way to help support or incentivize it. And the issue that we landed on was there is a deferred tax status treatment for agricultural land. And there were questions about whether land would be able to remain in that status if you added solar panels. Would it no longer be considered agricultural? Would it be considered land that's now generating energy and not primarily used for agriculture? And that's essentially what AB 479 is seeking to do, is clarify that if you added solar panels onto agricultural land and maintain that agricultural use or production, that the deferred property tax status on that land would continue to exist. So with that, let me just walk you very quickly through the bill. It is currently one section, and it defines agrivoltaic purposes. And again, this is in the context of this deferred property tax status. And then it essentially adds the use for agrivoltaic purposes in the definition of current employment of real property in agricultural use. Again, we're just making sure that it's clear that if you decide to go down this path, that would allow you to maintain this property tax status. There were some questions that came up. There were some concerns, including from local governments, that this could potentially be used in the reverse. So adding agricultural, some form of agricultural use to existing solar developments in order to reduce property tax liability. And so we definitely heard that as a concern. I think I've heard a lot of agreement in the overall principle, but concerns that the system might get gamed in some way. And so that's what led to the conceptual amendment before you. I just want to note a couple things. One, we did make some adjustments to the definition of agrivoltaic purposes. The first part is just kind of cleanup and reconfiguration, referencing the definition of agricultural use that is already in this statute. You can see it in the bill at the top of section 1 in subsection 1. But then we did add additional language requiring that this system would have to incorporate designs, technologies, or configurations that are conducive to integrated agricultural activities. So just taking the traditional solar field layout that you might see in the desert and plopping it onto agricultural land wouldn't be sufficient, because oftentimes it doesn't provide the spacing, the height, or other things that would help if you wanted to, for example, graze sheep or cultivate various crops. So the design would have to be put together in order to facilitate some specific agricultural use on the land. And then you will also see that we have added in this new subsection 4 the requirement that in order to acquire this benefit, the land has to be agricultural land receiving this status as of July 1st of this year, essentially as of kind of the effective date. And so, again, that helps prevent the opposite scenario of land that is not currently agricultural getting some agricultural use put on it in an attempt to reduce the tax burden. Instead, what we want to encourage is existing agricultural land to integrate solar power within it. And then there's a proposed section 2 to be added to the bill. And this actually, I think, is so those amendments were meant to help protect the existing tax base. This section is actually meant to help enhance the tax base. So if somebody moved forward with doing that, we would make sure that the land was assessed to include the value of the solar production that is being added to it. So that would increase the assessed value of those lands and actually increase revenue to the government while still maintaining that reduction from the deferred property tax status overall. So the goal is that being able to take advantage of that provides an incentive for folks to work together to co-locate agricultural production and solar power production. But again, with some additional protections in place to make sure that the system can't be gamed, that we would not see revenue reductions as a result of this, and in fact could potentially see some revenue enhancements if this additional value essentially is brought onto the landscape. So that concludes my presentation, and I am glad to answer any questions the committee may have.
Thank you so much for your presentation. Members, do we have any questions for Assembly Member Watts? I'll start with Assembly Member Haven.
Thank you, and thank you, Assemblymember Watts. Kind of like the concept. It sounds intriguing to me. And I want to talk about the amendment real quick, where it's saying that the has to be agricultural real property, July 1, 2025. I know a lot of farmers, they'll rotate their crop through, so maybe this 40 over, on the back 8 or on the back half of the field, they're not agging on July 1, 2025 because that field is, they just said, we're not going to farm that one, but they're farming the rest of them. Would that still qualify if they've been farming it, say, within the last 3 to 5 years and maybe have an expert coming up? No? Okay. So I just want to know the legislative intent behind it. Sounds like it would, but I just want to make sure that it's clear on the record.
Thank you for that question, Assemblymember Hafen. Howard Watts for the record. That's a great question. And I want to double check because I'm not an expert on the current deferred property tax status laws. What I can say is if that land, even though it's currently fallow, enjoys that tax status because it is in production, then absolutely. So again, the intent of that amendment is to make sure that we want this to apply to current agricultural land, and we want to make sure that people aren't trying to add agricultural production into solar production essentially to try and reduce their tax burden. So yes, that is the intent. One other thing that I did forget to mention, but I do want to bring up, currently there is the Renewable Energy Tax Abatement Program in the statutes for that, which is NRS 701A, I believe. There is a restriction on receiving that renewable energy tax abatement along with any other tax abatement or deferred tax status. And we mirrored that over on this side as well, just to ensure that you could not essentially stack. So you cannot stack RETA and this deferred tax status, even if you had agricultural land with solar being added to it. So I just wanted to make sure that was clear as well.
Thank you for that. I just have kind of a quick question because I wasn't sure. Has any other states implemented this type of program? And if so, were there some benefits or negatives, like what you kind of may have learned when you were looking into this?
Thank you so much for that question, Howard Watts for the record. Yes, several Western states have been exploring. They've been working on pilot projects, demonstration programs. In my opinion, Colorado is probably the furthest ahead in exploring the application of agrivoltaics, and they have a more comprehensive policy. It includes, again, some of these definitions. It does include some tax incentives, essentially, through their tax code, and then it has, at various points in time, also included appropriations of funds to help demonstrate and prove out some of these technologies, and perhaps we can explore that sometime in the future.
Thank you. Assembly members, do we have any other questions for Assembly Member Watts? It doesn't look like we would. Oh, sorry. Assembly Member O'Neill.
Thank you, Chair. Real quick question, because I missed part of it. I didn't have my glasses. When you talk about the production of power, it'd be solar panels and also wind turbines, or is there, it's all inclusive, I guess is the question.
Thank you for that question, Assemblymember O'Neill. Howard Watts for the record. This particular policy is focused just on the integration of solar panels onto agricultural land. So this does not currently cover wind turbines.
Follow up then. Which begs the next question, why not?
Thank you, Howard Watts, for the record. Honestly, again, a couple of reasons. One, while Nevada is very windy, for overall kind of in utility scale wind production, we're not a great location. We have one wind facility currently operating in Spring Valley over in eastern Nevada outside of Ely, because a lot of times our wind is fierce but inconsistent, right? It will blow like crazy for a little bit and then essentially disappear. So a lot of the conversations that we've had is about just the tremendous kind of demand and push for the development of solar. And so that's really the entire root of this conversation. So I don't want to rule it out, but I'm also hesitant to add it in at this point because all of these conversations have been related to solar power specifically and the integration of that into agriculture. And yeah, I do just want to emphasize too that this would be a completely voluntary program, and we're just trying to incentivize private landowners to explore this as a way that, again, they could kind of be innovative, maybe bring in some additional money and preserve agriculture while also help meeting the energy needs of our state.
I appreciate that. Thank you very much, sir. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. And with that, now we can go ahead and move on to testimony in support of Assembly Bill 479. We'll go ahead and start here in Carson City, so feel free to fill up the seats, and whoever sits down first and hits their microphone can go ahead and kick us off.
Thank you, Chair and members of the committee. Olivia Tanager for the record. I'll go ahead and kick us off. This was a bill that we brought forth in the interim, and we're really thankful to Assemblymember Watts for working on so diligently. We've talked to a lot of farmers, and you'll hear from some folks in the ag industry today about how beneficial this is for ag. But certainly from an environmental standpoint, this is a huge win. We get to help folks conserve water, so we're using less of our precious water resources. We get to take pressure off of our public lands from utility scale solar and hopefully site more of that on agricultural already disturbed lands. We get to bring more renewables online, and we get to help farmers, the backbone of our ag industry in the state, the folks who help us keep food on our tables. So really this is a win-win-win for so many different folks across the state. It's a win for the state, it's a win for farmers, it's a win for the environment, and we really appreciate you considering this bill and urge your strong support. Thank you.
Hello, committee. Good afternoon. Sheila Bray, University of Nevada, Reno. We are here in strong support. During the interim, Assemblymember Watts came to us and asked if we had any research that we've done in this area of agrivoltaics. And we have one researcher actually out of our extension office in Nye County that has started doing a little bit in this space and has done some great work with neighboring states to that particular question of other states that have done this type of work. So we're just really grateful that he brought this forward. It really puts this on the map and allows us to do even more research in this area as we have less land to actually grow on and less water. So thank you.
Good afternoon, Committee on Revenue. My name is Carrie Rohrmeyer, and I'm the Climate and Energy Strategy Director for the Nature Conservancy. It's absolutely our pleasure to support this Assembly Bill 479 with the proposed amendments. We thank Assemblyman Watts and others for working on this bill. We support the transition to renewable energy resources and support a smart from the start approach, which accelerates projects that maximize conservation values by promoting economic development and stability in Nevada. Agricultural land can be used for solar energy production. That's a good example of the kind of development that can take advantage of already disturbed lands and conserve others for wildlife, tribal cultural values, and recreational opportunities. Agrivoltaics may also help with preserving socioeconomic structure of rural communities as they address declining water availability. In Diamond Valley, where there is a mandated groundwater management plan that will result in land coming out of irrigated agricultural production, we worked with partners and found that the land is suitable for incorporating agrivoltaics with little to no irrigation, and this preserves and reduces groundwater use. The provisions of this bill encourage applications of agrivoltaics in Nevada and help maintain communities as they adapt with the pressures of renewable energy development and changes in irrigated agriculture. We urge you to support this important legislation. Thank you.
Chair, members of the committee, for the record, my name is Doug Busselman. I'm the Executive Vice President for Nevada Farm Bureau. Nevada Farm Bureau policy supports provisions to require multi-design for all renewable energy developments on federal lands. While we understand that AB 479 deals with private agricultural land, the same concepts apply, and we support passage of AB 479 to incorporate the definition of agrivoltaics that has been provided in this section of state law. We further see that the language of the conceptual amendment and the enhanced linkage to continued use of agricultural activities is an improvement to the bill. We encourage you to include the amendment and pass the amended AB 479. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Chantil Roberts. I am the Interior West Regional Director for Vote Solar. Vote Solar is a nonprofit organization committed to advancing energy and ensuring the benefits of clean energy reach communities that have been historically left behind. AB 479 recognizes agrivoltaics as a legitimate agricultural use, an important step towards a future where solar energy and food production can coexist, benefiting farmers, communities, and our clean energy goals. By making agrivoltaics eligible for agricultural tax assessments, this bill creates an opportunity for farmers and landowners to diversify their income, reduce operating costs, and contribute to Nevada's clean energy future. This kind of policy is exactly what we need to ensure that our transition to renewable energy is equitable and sustainable. For small and mid-sized farmers, the ability to generate solar energy while continuing agricultural operations could provide a much-needed financial cushion, which is so important considering the rising costs and climate-driven challenges that Nevada faces. AB 479 reinforces our commitment to smart land use, expanding clean energy without sacrificing food production. I urge this committee to support AB 479 and help move Nevada forward. Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Sandy Roth, and I'm here to encourage you to vote in favor of AB 479. The adoption of agrivoltaics can help ensure the profitability and long-term viability of ranching and farming in Nevada. Agrivoltaics benefit ranchers and farmers because they provide the ranchers and farmers with more affordable energy for their own operations, as well as a supplemental source of income. Furthermore, studies show that agrivoltaics can help increase yields for crops like alfalfa and protect cows from heat stress. In addition, the adoption of agrivoltaics would help conserve Nevada's limited water supply. Solar arrays on farms and ranches reduce water evaporation and improve the soil's water retention, therefore lessening agricultural water needs. And increased adoption of agrivoltaics can benefit our environment. Agrivoltaics would reduce greenhouse gas emissions by using more of Nevada's plentiful sunlight and less fossil fuel. At the same time, they would preserve Nevada's wilderness by decreasing the need for solar panels on undeveloped land. Instead, the solar panels would be added to existing farmland and ranch land. Other states with less sun and more water than Nevada are acting in a bipartisan manner to increase the adoption of agrivoltaics. For example, there was bipartisan sponsorship of an agrivoltaics bill in Colorado. And in a bill that is probably most similar to the one before you today, in Massachusetts, there was bipartisan support for a bill that would preserve the tax status of agricultural producers who add solar energy production to their farms. I believe Nevada should join them. AB 479 makes so much sense for Nevada on a variety of levels. I hope you all will support it. Thank you.
For the record, my name is Andrew Clark, Clarke, here today on behalf of New Day Nevada, an organization that fights for economic justice for working families. AB 479 is the rare opportunity to change the ways in which we collect energy while also bolstering state revenue, and we're proud to support. Thank you.
Chair and members of the committee, my name is Jake Tibbetts. I'm the Natural Resources Manager for Eureka County, and thank you for hearing the bill today. So Eureka County has been interested in finding ways to promote agrivoltaics for some time. We currently have literally thousands of acres of private farmlands under lease or some other type of site control in Eureka County. You heard about the feasibility study where Eureka County did partner with the Nature Conservancy to complete this study about pairing water overuse reductions and transitioning to agrivoltaics. Eureka County wishes to preserve our ag base. It's very important to us, but we're also realists in recognizing that there is a solar energy transition. The integrated uses of agriculture and solar and incentivizing these is good policy, we believe. So as such, we support AB 479, including with the amendment that we believe improves the bill. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Chair and members of the committee. For the record, my name is Christy Cabrera-Georgeson. I'm the Deputy Director of the Nevada Conservation League. We are here in support of AB 479. Would like to ditto all the comments previously made. This will benefit our agricultural sector while also growing our clean energy economy. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair and members of the committee. My name is Andrea Corral, here on behalf of Interwest Energy Alliance. Interwest is a trade association of large-scale renewable energy developers in the Inter-Mountain West. We are here today in support of AB 479 and want to thank Assemblymember Watts for working on this issue. The renewable energy industry supports the idea of agrivoltaics as providing the opportunity for having renewable energy alongside another land use on the same parcel. We believe that the bill's approach to incentivizing agrivoltaics is also a reasonable one. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. With that, we will go to Las Vegas. Is there anyone in Las Vegas wishing to give testimony in support of Assembly Bill 479? AVH, do we have anyone on the phone lines wishing to testify in support of Assembly Bill 479?
To testify in support of Assembly Bill 479, please press star 9 to take your place in the queue. Chair, we have no callers choosing to testify in support at this time.
Thank you so much. We'll go ahead and open up testimony in opposition of Assembly Bill 479. We'll start here in Carson City. I don't see anyone making their way to the dais. In Las Vegas, is there anyone wishing to give testimony in opposition to Assembly Bill 479? AVH, is there anyone on the phone line wishing to give testimony in opposition to Assembly Bill 479?
To testify in opposition to Assembly Bill 479, please press star 9 to take your place in the queue. Chair, we have no callers choosing to testify in opposition.
Thank you so much. We will go to neutral testimony. Is there anyone in Carson City wishing to give neutral testimony to Assembly Bill 479? Las Vegas, is there anyone wishing to give neutral testimony to Assembly Bill 479? I don't see anyone making their way up to the dais, so we'll go back to the phone lines. AVH, is there anyone on the phone lines wishing to testify in the neutral to Assembly Bill 479?
To testify in neutral for Assembly Bill 479, please press star 9 to take your place in the queue. Chair, we have no callers for neutral.
Thank you so much, and I understand that the chair is waiving any closing remarks. So with that, we can go ahead and close the hearing on Assembly Bill 479. We can now go ahead and open the hearing on Assembly Bill 279. Sorry about that. Come on down, and feel free to start when you're ready.
Good afternoon. I'm Assembly Member David Orentlicker, representing District 20 on the southeast side of Las Vegas. Thank you for the opportunity to present Assembly Bill 279 this afternoon. This bill proposes a very important way to reduce the number of people who die each year in Nevada, reduce the number of people who smoke cigarettes. More people die from smoking cigarettes than any other cause, and by a lot. So I'll show you, illustrate on this slide. As you see, this is United States, harder to get specific data for Nevada, but Nevada parallels this. You see almost 500,000 people die every year because they smoke cigarettes. And the next cause, drug overdoses, we hear a lot about, and it's a serious problem. But that's 87,000, less than 20%. And then gunshots, COVID-19, traffic collisions are less than 1/10 of the number of people who die from cigarettes. Even with COVID, in its worst 12-month period, fewer people died from COVID in the worst 12-month period than die every year from smoking cigarettes. And then traffic collisions, HIV, all these other causes, they're serious. But you add those all up, less than half the number of people who die from smoking cigarettes. So that's why this bill is addressed at reducing the number of new smokers. People are addicted now. We try to address their addiction, but this bill is designed to prevent young Nevadans from ever taking up and becoming addicted to cigarettes. Currently, people can't buy cigarettes until they're 21 years old. Under this bill, the minimum age to buy cigarettes will rise by 1 year every year. 21 today, 22 next year, 31 in 10 years. As a result, if you already can buy cigarettes, you always will be able to buy cigarettes. But if you're not able to buy cigarettes legally, then you will never be able to buy cigarettes in Nevada. Hopefully the other states will follow suit. By passing Assembly Bill 279, we can prevent our youth from becoming addicted to the deadliest consumer product sold in America today. I'll now walk you through the bill before turning to my co-presenters. First, my conceptual amendment deletes sections 1 through 3 of the bill, which deal with the registry for vaping products. There's a Senate bill that has a similar provisions. A lot of the opposition, in fact, almost all the opposition to this bill centered on those sections. They'll be taken out. So section 4.1A on page 3, that's the key part of the bill. And what that does is prohibits sales of cigarettes to anyone who turns 21 after this year. And this prohibition only applies to cigarettes, the combustible cigarettes that familiar Marlboros and Camels, etc., won't apply to vaping products, cigars, snuff, or the heated tobacco product you'll be hearing about. These nicotine alternatives are much less harmful than cigarettes, and people who are addicted to nicotine need alternatives. In addition, the minimum age to buy cigarettes in casinos will stay at 21. While AB 279 will prevent young Nevadans from becoming smokers, it will not prevent smokers from other states being allowed to smoke when they visit Nevada. The rest of the bill has conforming changes. I'll now invite my co-presenters to speak. First, Chris Bostic, who's joining us on Zoom. He's the Policy Director at Action on Smoking and Health.
Great, thank you, David. Am I coming through okay?
You do sound kind of robotic, but maybe try it again. Maybe now that we're connecting and seeing you, maybe it will sound a little better.
Okay, great. Let me know if it's if you really can't hear me. I can switch to a different headset.
Maybe you want to do that.
Okay, I'll do that right now. Just take a moment. Okay, can you hear me?
That is so much better. Thank you, sir. Go ahead.
Okay, actually, it even sounds better to me. Let me just get this on here. Thank you very much for having me here today and considering this very important bill. As Assemblymember Orton-Licker said, my name is Chris Bostic. I am the Policy Director for Action on Smoking and Health, which is the nation's oldest anti-tobacco organization, and I've been active in tobacco policy and advocacy for about 25 years. I am also the chair of a national steering committee called Project Sunset, which is a campaign to phase out the sale of commercial combustible tobacco products, exactly like as this bill does. And I co-chair the global Project Sunset committee. I'd like to start by illustrating the practicality and normality of this bill. It may seem to some like this is a radical departure from past tobacco control policies, and 10 years ago it may have been. But over the past decade, the public health community has embraced what is now called tobacco endgame measures. In 2020, this map was blank. Today, there are 21 jurisdictions in the United States alone that have enacted endgame laws, including 15 that employ a birth date-based phase-out as this bill does. There are also 3 other states with endgame bills on their docket for this year. That's Indiana, California, and Massachusetts. This is also a global movement. Just last week, the House of Commons in the United Kingdom passed a very similar bill to this by a vote of 366 to 41. It's almost certain to pass the House of Lords and become law. King Charles himself has actually come out publicly in favor of it. There are a number of other countries that are also considering it, and some states and other countries, for instance, South Australia, has already this bill has already passed their upper parliament. The second thing I want to talk about quickly is the product that this bill addresses. Dr. Robert Proctor, who is a Stanford historian, described in his landmark book, The Golden Holocaust, described cigarettes as the deadliest artifact in the history of human civilization. Cigarettes killed about 100 million people in the 20th century. And the WHO estimates that if we don't do something like this bill does, 1 billion people will die from cigarettes this century. And we're now a quarter of the way through this century, and we are on track to meet that dire prediction. So we need to do more than we're doing now. To put it bluntly, the cigarette is a defective product. No other consumer product addicts and kills when used as intended. Governments have banned the sale of other products that are far less harmful than cigarettes. If a new product was introduced to the market tomorrow that was highly addictive and killed when used as intended, surely it would be taken off the market immediately. And the people that put it on the market would probably be criminally charged if they knew the nature of that product. Unfortunately, we already have millions of people addicted to cigarettes. So it's not so simple as to just remove them from the shelf. AB 279 is the most practical and painless way to rectify the mistakes of the past and help future generations avoid becoming addicted to a deadly product. The nature of cigarettes has been recognized globally as well, as has the culpability of the tobacco industry, which has repeatedly over the past century claimed that they would cease their business if it was proven that cigarettes were harmful. This quote is from the World Health Organization in the lead up to the negotiations of the Framework Convention on Tobacco Control, which is the Global Tobacco Treaty, and it summarizes the industry interference that slows our public health progress. The WHO exists to fight disease and raise health standards. When Dr. Margaret Chan assumed the position of WHO Director General in 2006, she was asked about her priorities. Her response was tobacco, tobacco, tobacco. My third and final point is that the tobacco industry is not to be trusted. The industry has claimed that it is the solution to the epidemic they have caused, and you can go to their websites and find a lot of rhetoric about how there's going to be a smoke-free future. This is an absurd notion. The quote on the screen demonstrates what they think of their customers and their own product. Despite their claims that they are working for a smoke-free future, they spend untold amounts on political donations, lobbying, marketing, and litigation to ensure that cigarettes stay on the market forever. There are no doubt tobacco lobbyists in the room with you right now, although they often don't show themselves. Don't believe the industry's promises. They have never kept them. Thank you very much for your time and consideration. I look forward to your questions.
David Orton-Licker, thank you, Mr. Bostic. And now Jennifer Pearson, who's on the faculty of the University of Nevada, Reno School of Public Health, will can finish off our presentation.
Yes, thank you so much for the opportunity to speak today. I am so excited to be here. Like you said, my name's Jennifer Pearson. I'm an associate professor in the School of Public Health at UNR. I'm also a proud Reno High School graduate, so a local. As a tobacco control researcher with over 130 publications and in this area, and as an author of the Surgeon General's report on e-cigarette use among youth and young adults, I am deeply familiar with the devastating death and disease associated with cigarette smoking. I'd like to make 3 points in addition to what my colleagues already said tonight. First, AB 279 intentionally focuses on cigarettes, by far the most harmful nicotine product. Cigarettes are wildly addictive, defective consumer products that kill roughly half of the people who use them daily. While not harmless, our best evidence suggests that e-cigarettes are significantly less harmful, containing fewer carcinogens than cigarettes. Excuse me when I figure out how to advance the slides here. The slides are not advancing on the screen. Well, I will just tell you what's on the screen. Yeah, I'm on slideshow. It's just not advancing. That's very strange. Okay, well, I will read this to you. So I have a slide that shows comparing e-cigarettes to cigarettes, their exposures. So compared to e-cigarettes, cigarettes have 9 times the formaldehyde, 450 times the acetaldehyde, and 15 times the acrolein. All these are known human carcinogens. And these exposures translate to better health outcomes for cigarette smokers. So they have better lung function, better cardiovascular function when adult smokers switch completely from cigarette smoking to e-cigarettes. Unlike Prohibition, which eliminated legal access to all alcohol, AB 279 only restricts sales of the most harmful version of the nicotine delivery device, the cigarette, to young people born after December 31st, 2004. Less harmful, more modern sources of nicotine, such as e-cigarettes, will still be available to people born after this date. AB 279's targeted restriction on cigarette sales reflects a common practice of limiting access to harmful products, differentiating it from broader prohibitions by still allowing less dangerous nicotine alternatives. Second, I'd like to also highlight that AB 279 will reduce health disparities in our state. While cigarette smoking is at its lowest recorded level for both adults and youth, there are enormous and growing disparities in who smokes and who suffers from smoking-related disease. For example, the richest Americans live nearly 10 to 15 years longer than the poorest Americans. A third of this gap for men and a quarter of this gap for women is attributable to cigarette smoking. This disparity contributes to a cycle of poverty and poor health outcomes. Individuals with mental illness are 2 to 3 times more likely to smoke than those without such conditions. People with alcohol use disorders smoke at rates up to 80%. People with other substance use disorders smoke at rates up to 98%. And according to 2023 Nevada data, high school students in rural and frontier areas of our own state are 40 to 70% more likely to have smoked cigarettes in the past 30 days than urban high school students. These data show that, while we have made incredible progress towards a smoke-free society, people are still being left behind. AB 279 would benefit all Nevadans, no matter how much money or education they have, their mental health or substance use status, or where they live. And finally, I'd like to remind you that AB 279 will save us money. Smoking directly causes $1.25 billion in annual healthcare costs for Nevada. The portion of these costs covered by the state's Medicaid program totals $160.1 million. This is in contrast to a projected 2025 income from cigarette excise taxes of roughly $113 million, an amount which is projected to decrease 4 to 5% annually between 2026 and 2027, according to the Economic Forum. Even a 1% decrease in the smoking prevalence in Nevada would save us over $17 million in Medicaid costs in the following year. Perhaps it goes without saying that governments shouldn't depend on tax revenue from a product that addicts and kills their own citizens. However, the economics are also on AB 279's side. Cigarette smoking costs the state more money than it brings in. Clearly, smoking's time has come. Cigarettes are antiquated and deadly. AB 279 will make cigarette smoking a thing of the past and allow future generations to grow up without the burden of smoking-related suffering and death. I thank you for your time and attention.
Thank you, Dr. Pearson, David Ornett-Licker. This concludes our presentation, and we welcome your questions.
Thank you so much, Assemblymember and doctors, for your presentation. Members of our committee, does anyone have any questions? We'll start with Vice Chair Considine. Gotcha.
Thank you so much for this presentation. If this measure passes, will the result of this being that it's driving folks to casinos or to the Strip to buy cigarettes? Has that been discussed? Since there is the prevalent access to all of that throughout Nevada.
I think some proportion of people who are determined to get access to cigarettes will certainly go to casinos. But, think about your own kind of behavior, right? Like, I personally live a mile away from my gym, and how often do I actually go, right? And it's true. And young people are growing up in a society where cigarette smoking is becoming less and less normalized. And so, they're living in this kind of soup where cigarette use, they know it's bad for them, they know it's not normalized, there's social pressure against it. And they also have to go to a casino to buy cigarettes. It's really going to be a lot of barriers to them. And most people are going to take the easy way, which is they're not going to smoke. Or if they're determined to get nicotine, they're going to use the lower harm forms of the nicotine, like e-cigarettes and nicotine pouches. And I'm sorry, this is Jennifer Pearson for the record.
Next, we'll go ahead to Assemblymember Gallant.
Thank you, Chair. Did I hear you say that it wasn't going to apply to people that don't live in the state of Nevada?
David Ornett-Licker, well, in effect, because if you go to a casino, the age 21 will still be the limit. So of course, anybody is, Assemblymember Considine's question indicated, anybody who would go into a casino would be subject to a 21. But I was just suggesting that our visitors frequent casinos when they come here. So therefore, they would be able to buy cigarettes under an age 21 limit. So it's not that they have a different rule based on where their residence is. I was just saying it, functionally, visitors would have a 21 limit because they stay at casinos.
Follow up? Yeah. So this would just apply, so casinos would be 21 and over, but what about Dottie's, right? Or even places off the Strip like Stations Casinos and things of that nature?
David Ornett-Licker. So under 4.1A, this applies to properties that have a non-restricted license for gaming.
Okay.
So I'm not an expert on the full extent of that, but it does limit which places would have the 21 limit preserved.
Quick. Okay, so non-restrictive licensing. So there are casinos or Dottie's or these types of, establishments all over southern Nevada. So I think there might only be a Dottie's like a mile from my house. So I'm curious, with the philosophy of trying to make sure that everybody just has to go through the task of going to a casino, but then you've got these other establishments that are a mile away. Is this actually going to accomplish what you were hoping it would accomplish?
David Ornett-Licker, it definitely will make a difference, sure. As Dr. Pearson said, there's still, right now, if you want to buy a pack of cigarettes, smoke shops, gas station convenience stores, grocery stores, you don't have to walk very far to get a pack of cigarettes. This will definitely make it more daunting.
Thank you. We'll go to Assemblymember O'Neill.
Thank you, Chair. And with your permission, I've got two questions. One, building upon my colleagues. First, I got to say, I really appreciate the innovative manner you're looking at, and I know it is a serious health problem, having several close friends of mine die from cancer and well before their time, may I say. But we're talking about casinos, but I'm thinking about several of the truck stops. I ride a motorcycle all over. And my brother we'd stop at a truck stop that would have slots, but he lived in Arizona. He'd want to buy a pack of cigarettes. Naturally, he could when he was alive. Now he can't. But would he have been able to under this law? I mean, their truckers are passing through, a variety of people on the interstates. I guess that's what I'm asking. When you just say casinos, you're looking at truck stops that don't have that unrestricted license. Would they be prohibited also, and you're prohibiting those out-of-staters? That's my first question for you. The next one's a lot easier. We'll go to the doctor.
David Orentlicker. So no, a truck stop, if the property does not have an unrestricted gaming license, then this bill would apply. But Doctor, you want to add?
Yeah, and I'm hearing some concern from Jennifer Pearson, for the record. Sorry about that. I'm hearing some concern from the committee that there will be too many places left over that will allow sales to people after, it'll continue the status quo of 21 and above. I hear that. However, data is really strong that the fewer places there are to buy cigarettes, the less people smoke. It's just across the board, across the world. So as we restrict where people can buy cigarettes, fewer people will smoke, just period.
I appreciate that. In getting to my second, I'm going to tell you I'd have a tough time getting Norm then to come visit me if he couldn't stop at a truck stop and buy a pack. But my second question is, and I think you sort of touched on it, Dr. Pearson, when you said they would convert over to less addictive or less harmful mechanisms of tobacco, such as chewing tobacco. You listed a couple other small things. As I recall, chewing tobacco also has cancer-causing. So are we missing if you're going to go after cancer and tobacco, to me, you're leaving out a large issue there. Could you help me understand that part, please?
Absolutely. Jennifer Pearson, for the record. So there's a continuum of harm on tobacco products and nicotine-containing products where the least harmful ones are the FDA-approved nicotine patch and gum, and the most harmful ones are cigarettes, way on the other side, from the earth to the sun, we're talking how much harmful they are. Now, smokeless tobacco like chew or dip absolutely causes cancer, but the thing is you don't light it on fire and inhale it. And that's where a lot of the harm comes when it comes to smoking. You don't get lung cancer, for example, from chewing tobacco. There are some cardiovascular effects, but it's nothing like cigarette smoking. So what we're doing here is we're, first of all, allowing people like your friend to continue to purchase cigarettes, because I'm assuming that he's older than 21 as of today. So, he can continue to purchase cigarettes and go on his merry way. That's fine. What we're doing is we're focusing on the people who are coming up who have not really had the time to develop nicotine dependence. And we're saying, for you all, by far the most harmful thing, the cigarette that we know kills 490,000 people a year and is more addictive than heroin by some measures. We're saying that thing, that defective consumer product, you guys are going to have access to anymore. And it's just that. And if they are determined to get nicotine, they can either go to a casino, go out of their way every single time they want to buy some cigarettes, which, okay, fine. Or if they're determined, they can try the less harmful versions, the non-combusted versions. What I mentioned is a nicotine pouch, which has synthetic nicotine in it, which has very few of the carcinogens that even chewing tobacco has. So on the continuum of harm, that looks even more like the FDA-approved items than cigarettes. So I hope I answered your question.
You did, and I appreciate it. As I said with this bill that you're bringing forward, your innovation, but your enthusiasm for it. I understand. And thank you for the time, Chair. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you so much. With that, we will go to our last question from Assemblymember Golding.
Thank you, Chair. I'm wondering if research has been done in the states that have started this process, and if there's any indication that this restriction drives any illicit market, either in an illicit tobacco market or a cannabis market, or other things we're trying to potentially avoid because of its health effects.
Jennifer Pearson for the record. So I am not aware of any research at this point. I think it's just too new. And being a professor, I will confess, it takes us a really long time to do research. So I would say there's nothing that I'm aware of yet. I'm wondering if Chris on Zoom knows of anything.
Sure. Chris Bostic for the record. You're absolutely right, Dr. Pearson. These measures are so new that we haven't had, not just not that time to do the research, but we haven't had there's not that many people yet that it has affected, right? Because not that many people have been born after the date that are now over 21 that can't purchase. So that will come in later. There's been a lot of modeling studies done around the world that show that they do not expect a big increase in illicit trade, precisely because the people that this is going to be affecting never got a chance to get addicted, because they weren't able to ever get the stuff. And as the age goes up, it's going to become less and less likely for them to get addicted, because it's one thing to have a 23-year-old buy a friend cigarettes. It's another thing to have a 43-year-old buy somebody cigarettes. So as we go forward, there's going to be less and less demand for the product. Thank you.
And just as a point of clarification, will this have any effect on tribal smoke shops? So that's another place where smoked tobacco products would still be available in Nevada. Okay, thanks.
Jennifer Pearson for the record. As far as I know, this would not affect tribal smoke shops. And I just want to reiterate again, the fewer places people can buy cigarettes, the less they smoke. Yes, it's not perfect.
Okay, with that, thank you, presenters, for your presentation of Assembly Bill 279. We'll go ahead and open the hearing now to take testimony in support of Assembly Bill 279. We will start here in Carson City. Those wishing to give testimony in support of Assembly Bill 279, make your way up here. In Las Vegas, is there anyone in Las Vegas wishing to give testimony in support of 279? AVH, do we have anyone on the phone lines wishing to give testimony in support of Assembly Bill 279?
To testify in support for Assembly Bill 279, please press star 9 to take your place in the queue. Chair, we have no callers choosing to testify in support at this time.
Thank you so much. We will go to testimony in opposition to Assembly Bill 279. We'll start here in Carson City. Is there anyone in Carson City wishing to give testimony in opposition to Assembly Bill 279? Please make your way forward to give that testimony. Thank you. Insert just the microphone power, I think, is right on the bottom, and make sure you state your name for the record, and it'll be helpful if you spell it for our secretaries as well.
For the record, my name is Obeid Mubalig. Good afternoon, Chairman and members of the Assembly Revenue Committee. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. I'm the proud owner of the Country Store in Carson City and a smoke shop, and I have owned these businesses for over 20 years. I believe the Assembly Bill 279 is not the right solution for Nevada. It will harm local businesses, unfairly discriminate against adults. The bill will significantly harm Nevada's retail business that sell tobacco and cigarettes products by reducing revenue and jeopardizing the livelihood of business owners, their families, and employees who depend on these businesses. The bill would limit the legal product choice of adult customers that were born after December 31, 2004. And if adult customers cannot buy their preferred products in our stores, they will go outside of our state to make their purchases. While there, they will also purchase gas, grocery items, and beverages. Worse yet, banning these products could shift sales from law-abiding responsible retailers like us to illegal sources. We don't check IDs. I'm here to express serious concern about Assembly Bill 279, especially the part that allows young adults to purchase tobacco, but only inside casinos. Let me be clear. I understand the health concerns around tobacco. I support reasonable regulation that protect people. But this bill does not do that in a fair or effective way. Under AB 279, a 21-year-old can buy cigarettes at a corner store, but they can walk into a casino and make that same purchase. In doing so, we are exposing young adults to an environment that is far more addictive and financially destructive than tobacco, gambling. Casinos aren't just places to buy cigarettes. They are designed to keep people inside, spending money, chasing alcohol. As a business owner and someone who sees how addiction impacts families, I can tell you this is a dangerous door to open. We're not just talking about health anymore. We are talking about pushing people towards financial harm, debt, and addiction. And behind that, AB 279 hurt small businesses. It cuts off revenue from legal, regulated tobacco sales for stores across the state while giving a clear advantage to large casinos. That's not protecting our communities. That is protecting corporate interest. If we truly care about health, the law should be consistent and fair. We shouldn't be pushing 21-year-olds into casinos under the pretense of public safety. Nevada deserves smarter policy that protects youth, respects families, and supports the small businesses. I'm a proud father of a daughter that when we were in California, they started from the first grade generation of non-smoking. I think that will help better instead of going, after 21 years old. I think we should educate our kids from the beginning so they don't smoke. And let me give you, just as a business owner here in Carson City, how much money that we pay every year to the state for revenue. NVCC, OTP tax, 2021, $1,660,000 that I paid to the state. SNO OTP tax, 2021, $1,224,000. Carson City, the country store.
Sir, if you don't mind wrapping up your testimony, that'd be great. Thank you.
It's just one more second, that's it. And SSVS LLC, which is a smoke shop, $1,690,000 in revenue, in sales tax. And I think I really request that we should oppose this bill, AB 279. That doesn't help Nevada. Thank you so much.
Good afternoon, Chairman and members of the Assembly Revenue Committee. The gentleman has covered most of the points that I was going to say. And also
Before you get started, can you just say your name for the record and if you're representing any organization or anything like that?
Yes, I'm a businessman here in Reno since 1991. And I have 5 convenience stores. And my name is Deep Virk. And so the gentleman has covered most of the points. And also from the testimony that I heard from the good doctor, what I heard was mental health, poverty, and education are what need to be tackled, and that's what's going to improve everything. And if we remove tobacco from some of the stores, I believe on every corner there's going to be a Dottie's, as you had mentioned, and that's not going to solve any problem. I think that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Chairman Buckus, members of the committee, thank you for the opportunity to speak today. My name is Mary Harwell, and I am here today on behalf of Dad's Quick Mart. We've been doing business in Nevada for about 18 years and proudly employ 20 hardworking Nevadans. I have been there for 13 years myself, and today I'm here to testify against Assembly Bill 279, tobacco-free generation legislation, as I strongly believe that banning legal products does not work. AB 279 will create significant challenges for Nevada retailers. This bill does not target minors, but instead restricts the rights of adults aged 21 and older to make their own purchasing decisions. It's worth noting that youth tobacco use is at an all-time low, which raises questions about the necessity of this legislation. History has repeatedly shown that outright bans are ineffective. Prohibition does not work. This bill will likely push sales into an unregulated black market where there's no safeguards such as quality control or age verification. At our store, they pointed out that cigarette companies lie. And I have a hard time seeing, but they said something about the young should smoke. I can guarantee that Ultra, who is Marlboro, she comes in, the first thing she does, she checks for our signs. She watches the people to make sure if somebody's buying cigarettes, that they are 21, because they don't want young people to smoke. My grandchildren, who are now 16, 17, and one will be 19, have worked at Dad's, and they don't even sell the cigarettes. They have to holler for one of the adults because you have to be 21 to buy or sell cigarettes. But they see the cost of them, and they will make little comments to the people. Do you know how much you're spending on those things? And they will never smoke because they see the cost. They tell them, they talk to their friends. This is what people buy at the store because people are really crazy. We do Kids in Need. We do bake sales. We do car washes because we love Nevada. We love the youth in Nevada. And we are all for having the kids, telling the kids don't smoke, but having a 21-year-old not be able to buy cigarettes, it will happen just like when California said no more flavors. You can't buy flavored cigarettes, no chew. They came to Nevada. I have had people walking in asking for 10 cartons of Newport. Oh, what kind of vacation are you going on? Oh, no, I live in California. They don't sell them to us anymore. Well, I can sell you a carton. That's all I can sell you. Because they were taking them back to California and selling them for $25, $30 a pack. Chew, they say it's less. The old GM, his wife works at a dentist office.
Ms. Hartwell, if you can wrap up your testimony,
I'm sorry,
that'd
I'm
be
just
great.
saying
No, it's okay. It's very helpful. But
in conclusion, I urge you to consider the unintended consequences of implementing this progressive legislation. Please vote no. And thank you for your time.
Thank you. With that, we'll go to Las Vegas. Is there anyone in Las Vegas this afternoon wanting to give testimony in opposition to Assembly Bill 279? Once you make your way to the dais, feel free to start.
Good afternoon, Chairman Backus and members of the committee. My name is Liz Lutz, and I'm here today on behalf of Shortline Express Market to ask you to oppose the tobacco-free generation legislation. Assembly Bill 279, we have operated 17 retail businesses in Nevada for over 30 years and currently employ 250 Nevadans. This legislation restricts the ability of adults over 21. This legislation creates two classes of adults over the age of 21. Banning the sale of legal tobacco products sends a message that adults are incapable of making their own decisions. It is not the government's role to dictate what legal products adults can or cannot consume. Youth usage of tobacco is already at an all-time low, and this legislation does nothing but restrict the rights of adults 21 and older. This legislation is not the right solution for Nevada. It will harm local businesses and unfairly discriminate against adults. I urge you to consider the broader negative consequences of this legislation and oppose Assembly Bill 279.
Thank you so much. With that, we'll go to the phone lines. AVH, is there anyone on the phone lines wishing to give testimony in opposition to Assembly Bill 279?
To testify in opposition to Assembly Bill 279, please press star 9 to take your place in the queue. Caller with the last three digits 447, please press star 6 to unmute yourself.
Good afternoon, Chair and committee members. My name is Megan Bolter, and I'm a public health law attorney that specializes in tobacco regulation at the local, state, and federal levels. Today, I represent the Nevada Tobacco and Smoke-Free Coalition as a board member and respectfully submit opposition to AB 279 in its current form. NTCSC is comprised of public and private health organizations, including local and national nonprofits, insurance payers, medical associations, higher education, and others. We seek to eliminate exposure to secondhand smoke and vape emissions and reduce commercial tobacco use in Nevada. As such, we appreciate Assemblymember Orrin Licker's intentions to further limit youth exposure and access to tobacco products. However, the provisions of this bill, it previously included a vape product registry, birthday tobacco sales restrictions that only apply to the sale of combustible tobacco, and provide an exemption from the restriction for sales in specific gaming locations. In addition, Section 8 of the bill would authorize counties to adopt penalties for the purchase, use, and/or possession of tobacco products by individuals ages 18, 19, and 20. We appreciate the redaction of the registry provisions because the FDA already publishes a list of products that are authorized for sale in the United States. I did hear a reference to SB 435, which is actually a more onerous proposition for a state registry that will cost the state millions. In order to address the existing provisions, I did want to talk a bit about NTSA's support of the restriction on cigarette sales through the birthday restriction. However, there is a glaring omission of including restriction on the sale of e-cigarettes and vapor products in the generational provision. And yet, e-cigarettes are the most popular products used by youth, as reported in every youth survey assessing youth tobacco and nicotine use among kids. Nicotine is the addictive agent, and I am not here to get in a battle of the experts. However, it does need to be said that the claims that e-cigarettes have limited harms are tenuous at best, and there is a large body of evidence, respectfully, growing of additional health impacts related to mental health burden, as well as increased cognitive decline, impairment, cardiovascular issues, anxiety, attention, mood, and cognitive dysfunction, particularly among youth who use e-cigarettes. I also need to emphasize that no e-cigarette device has ever been approved by the FDA for cessation.
Ma'am, if you don't mind wrapping up your testimony, that'd be greatly appreciated. You can also always submit your testimony in writing.
For sure. The other two had a bit of an extension, so I'd appreciate the same accommodation. Although they intend to further restrict tobacco sales, Section 8 of the legislation would expand county authority to provide penalties for individuals ages 18, 19, and 20. POP laws have shown no deterrent impact on youth use, and if anything, penalize kids for an addiction in part due to the predatory marketing and sales tactics of the tobacco industry. We appreciate your consideration of our comments, and we would like to continue to work with the bill sponsor and ASH on the legislation that includes evidence-based strategies that actually reduce tobacco use in the state of Nevada. We appreciate your consideration.
Caller with the last three digits 990, please press star 6 to unmute yourself. Caller with the last three digits 990, please press star 6 to unmute yourself. You may begin.
Hello, Chairman and committee members. My name is Aman Singh. I'm the owner of Royal Market. I'm also the proud mother of 3, and I take my responsibilities as a mother and as a business owner very seriously. I'm here today to ask you to vote no on Assembly Bill 279 because I believe it's not good for Nevada. As a business owner and a mother, I am very busy. I'm taking the time out today to take this call. And it's not easy, but this is important, and I value the opportunity to be part of the conversation. Thank you. By prohibits of the sale of cigarettes to people born after December 31, 2004, we are essentially telling some adults over the age of 21 that they're not capable of making their own decisions. We would be creating 2 classes of adults, those that we respect their choices and autonomy and those that we do not. Additionally, youth tobacco usage is at all-time low. Retail efforts in checking IDs have contributed to the significantly decrease in youth smoking, which is now at the lowest in generation. The current system of licensed retailers, strong minimum age laws, and legislative oversight is working. Thank you for your consideration. Please oppose Assembly Bill 279.
Ma'am, before you hang up, Ms. Singh, before you hang up, do you mind stating your name clearly and also spelling it for the record? It's kind of hard when some people are on the phone. Thank you.
Okay. My first name is Aman, A-M-A-N, last name Singh, S-I-N-G-H.
Thank you so much for that.
Chair, we have no more callers choosing to testify in opposition at this time.
With that, we'll go ahead and move to neutral testimony to Assembly Bill 279. We'll start here in Carson City. Is there anyone wishing to give testimony in the neutral to Assembly Bill 279? Las Vegas, is there anyone wishing to give testimony in the neutral to Assembly Bill 279? AVH, is there anyone on the phone line wishing to testify in the neutral to Assembly Bill 279?
To testify in neutral to Assembly Bill 279, please press star 9 to take your place in the queue. Chair, we have no callers choosing to testify in neutral at this time.
Thank you so much. With that, I'll go ahead and invite the bill sponsor back up for any closing remarks.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, members of the committee. No doubt change is hard and it can be scary. And I can see why business owners, when they see a change in the rules, get nervous. But I want to reassure them because things won't be problematic for them because all of their current customers, it doesn't change anything for their current customers. And for their newer customers, they can still sell vaping products and these less harmful products. And the good news is their customers will live longer if they're buying vape and other less harmful nicotine products. And finally, as Dr. Pearson pointed out, the overall economic impact will be positive for the state. So these small business owners will be fine, and the state overall will do better. And then I'll turn to my co-presenters. Thank you.
Jennifer Pearson for the record. So there's just one additional point I want to make. I heard concern that this bill does not address e-cigarettes or other tobacco products. And I just want to be clear, e-cigarettes are harmful. They absolutely are. But they're orders of magnitude less harmful than cigarettes. So obviously, as a state, we need to continue to do all the things that we're doing to reduce youth e-cigarette use and to reduce adult e-cigarette use. But the horse is kind of out of the barn when it comes to nicotine use in our society, right? Like we can't just say, simply no nicotine access. That would cause significant disruption. So we need to figure out kind of a nice halfway measure, a way to ease our way into reducing the 500,000 deaths a year we have from cigarette smoking by creating a smoke-free generation, a cigarette-free generation. And then once we get that down, we can address the other less harmful. Suddenly, that will make e-cigarettes the most harmful tobacco product, right? Once we no longer have cigarettes. And then we can work on that. So I also just want to make actually one more point. This idea of free choice is kind of strange when you think about an addictive product. Adults should be able to choose, right? But you're not really choosing if you're addicted. 80% of adult smokers say they wish they had never started. And people try and try and try. I'm sure we all know people who have tried to quit smoking and failed over and over and over again. Why don't we give our youth coming up the chance to live in a world where they don't have to do that. Thank you so much.
Thank you. With that, we'll go ahead and close the hearing on AB 279. We do need to take a 1-minute recess to do two things. One, I'll be presenting the next bill, but also we need AVH to come up, and I know to do some work on the computer.
Okay, we will now open the hearing on Assembly Bill 536. Presenting today, we have our own Assembly Member Shea Backus and co-presenters who she will introduce. Please begin when you're ready.
Thank you so much, Vice Chair and Committee on Revenue. To keep things to my rule and have a presentation of 15 minutes or less, I'm merely going to introduce Assembly Bill number 536 on behalf of the Committee on Revenue, which revises provisions relating to tobacco, specifically heated tobacco products, not those that are ignited and burned. And with me today to truly present this bill is Eddie Ablasar, CEO of Tri-Strategies, James Curry, Director of External Affairs for Philip Morris International, and Dr. Brian Urkala, Senior Advisor of Scientific Engagement for Philip Morris International. With that, I'll go ahead and turn it over to Mr. Ablasar.
Thank you, Assemblymember Backus. Good afternoon, Assembly members. For the record, my name is Eddie Ablasar, spelled A-B-L-E-S-E-R. It's a pleasure to be before you today to present on Assembly Bill 536. We did have the pleasure of presenting in the interim on this concept about the new and exciting innovative technologies that are disrupting the tobacco industry. Philip Morris International, PMI, has achieved tremendous success over the past decade by introducing heat not burn technology in European and Asian markets, helping current smokers transition from combustible cigarettes, which expose them to harmful chemicals and tar, to far less harmful alternatives. This technology is the beginning and currently being introduced here in the United States. And I want to be clear, this bill applies not to a specific product. It applies to all the companies that have a variety of heated tobacco, heat not burn products that are currently being sold internationally and will eventually come to the United States. Today, you'll hear more about the FDA's authorization of this harm-reducing product, as well as a policy proposal on how we might use tax incentives to incentivize people, so taxes to incentivize people to switch from a combustible cigarette to a less harmful alternative, significantly reducing the harm to an individual and eliminating secondhand smoke. Before I turn it over to my colleagues, I want to highlight some of the work that has been done to date on differentiated tax rate. Philip Morris International has engaged extensively with the business community, entertainment industry, and passionate advocates working to reduce tobacco-related harm. Since we last presented to this committee, we've received valuable feedback, and I'd like to specifically point out two key provisions of the bill. Given the sensitive history surrounding tobacco and nicotine, we wanted to ensure that Nevada's public health groups were involved in our discussions on this bill. We reached out to the Nevada Tobacco Prevention and Control Coalition. It's a coalition made up of rural partnership programs, Nevada Health Districts, American Heart Association, Lung Association, Cancer Association, to gain feedback on this topic. In our preliminary meeting, we gained a lot of valuable insight, including concerns about youth access and the absence of a provision binding the product to post-market youth use metric. These concerns we absolutely share. While we know that public health organizations generally work in absolutes on this topic, we know that they weren't able to further the dialogue on the aspects of the bill, but we did hear their feedback and took it seriously and introduced in the language in this legislation both provisions on FDA authorization as well as a youth use post-market survey that my colleagues will address in just a minute. So I'm going to turn it over to first Mr. Curry from Philip Morris International, and then he'll bring in Dr. Urkala.
Thank you, Madam Chair and members of the committee. For the record, James Curry, spelled C-U-R-R-Y. I am the Director of External Affairs in the Western U.S. for Philip Morris International. Pleased to be here today. PMI is a company, an American company that is transforming its products into innovative smoke-free tobacco and nicotine options that are going to be a much better choice for adults who would otherwise continue to smoke. Today, there are roughly 28 million American smokers, and that's not only damaging to their health, it's damaging to our country. It's estimated that upwards of $600 billion cost to the U.S. economy in terms of health and lost productivity. We also know that about 50% of smokers attempt to quit every year, and only about 1 in 9 of those are successful. And so PMI is committed to seeking to help address that. And we start by saying, first and foremost, if you don't smoke, you shouldn't start. If you do, the best option is to quit. And for those 28 million or so Americans that either can't or are unable to, we want to offer a step forward in the right direction. PMI has invested roughly $14 billion to develop smoke-free products and alternatives to combustible cigarettes. One of these products is IQOS, a device that heats tobacco to a specific temperature short of combustion. This provides the user with a nicotine experience similar to smoking, but without toxic smoke. And eliminating smoke caused by combustion dramatically reduces the health risk. Research has shown that IQOS emits on average 95% lower levels of harmful chemicals compared to cigarettes. And I will defer the rest of that conversation to Dr. Erkla, but I would like to talk a little bit about the tobacco excise tax. So the FDA has authorized IQOS as a modified risk tobacco product, and that means they've determined the product significantly reduces the risk of tobacco-related disease to individual users, and it's beneficial to the public health and to the public in general. The tobacco product excise tax is it's often considered an indirect tax. It's applied at the wholesaler and distributor level. So it is not apparent to a consumer what the amount of that tax is. It's built into the cost of the product. And it exists for two reasons. One, to affect consumer behavior, cause people to buy less of the product as you increase it, but also to offset the cost to the state of health problems incurred by the continued use of the product. So, in support of harm reduction principles and common sense, tobacco products should be taxed proportionately to their risk. So, which means that the most harmful tobacco products at the highest level, which would be combustible cigarettes, and taxing non-combustible products should be much lower to reflect that risk. And I think the state of Nevada, particularly the nearly 500,000 casino workers who live and work in this state, can take a giant step forward by allowing an incentive to introduce these products, a whole category of products in the state, and by providing that incentive to consumers of combustible cigarettes to switch to a lower harm option, we can help take a major step forward in advancing public health in the state of Nevada. With that, I'd like to turn it over to Dr. Erkla. Happy to answer questions.
Thanks very much. For the record, my name is Dr. Brian Erkla, B-R-I-A-N-E-R-K-K-I-L-A. I'd like to thank the committee very much for giving me the opportunity to speak today. So what I'm going to talk about today is our product IQOS. This is, as Eddie also said, is just one of the heated tobacco products that exist. It just so happens to be the one that I know most about, and also the one that has been through the FDA authorization process. So what I'm going to do is highlight a little of the information that went into that evidence package to the Food and Drug Administration. It was a 2 million page document, but I'm just going to hit the highlights today. So I think it's always important to look at where we are, right? And so right now we have about 1 in 7 adults in Nevada are currently combusted cigarette users. That's over 300,000 people, okay? And that leads to over 4,000 deaths a year. This is a big problem. It's an emotional problem. Having lost my father in the last year to his tobacco smoking, it's one that hits me personally. But as the previous speaker also mentioned, there's also disparities here. If you are lower income, you are 2.5 times as likely to smoke than someone who's higher income. If you have less than a high school education, you're almost 4 times as likely to smoke than someone who graduated from college. And those unable to work are 2.3 times higher. But it's not just this emotional and this tragic loss of life. It's also a fiscal issue. The cost of smoking in the state, $1.25 billion in healthcare costs, $160 million Medicaid, and productivity losses of over $2.6 billion. Think of this as people who can no longer work or get sick and can't work for that reason. But when we think about what's so wrong with smoking, we all know it's bad for us, but why is it actually so bad? And the answer is combustion. We know that when you light a cigarette and inhale on it, you get temperatures that go over 1,100 degrees. And at that temperature, tobacco burns, it combusts, and that creates thousands and thousands of chemicals that are then inhaled by a user, right? These chemicals include carcinogens, cardiovascular toxicants, and respiratory toxicants. So what I'm showing on the right here is just it's a simple graph. What it shows is that as you go up in temperature, those carcinogens and those other toxins really increase as you get up in temperature. But we've talked about before other products and this idea of a continuum of risk. So that combustion, that creates products that are over there on the left, right? These are the combusted products. These are by far the most harmful. They are also by far the most used products in the United States, okay? All the way on the right, we have complete cessation. That's your best option if you're a smoker, right? But in the middle, we have this section called non-combusted products or smoke-free products. This is going to be your smokeless tobacco, your e-cigarettes, your heated tobacco products, your nicotine pouches. Now, all of these, we can sort of have a conversation about where they fall in the ranks of harm, but I always liken it to another harm reduction issue and say it's sunscreen. Whichever smoke-free product you will use instead of that combusted cigarette and stay off of that combusted cigarette, that's the right product for you, okay? But today I'm here to talk about IQOS. And so the issue of combustion and why this product sort of gets past that. So we've spent decades developing this device, and I have it here in my hand. Real quick, this is the charging block. This works if you have AirPods, much like this. If you, throughout the day, it charges internally what is this heating device, okay? This is gonna come in a minute. And then the last part is the heat stick. So the heat stick is going to go into this device, and then it's gonna be used by the user. It lasts for 6 minutes or 14 puffs, which is how people smoke a cigarette because that ritual is so important, that hand to mouth. But as you can see on the right, IQOS only gets up to about 300 degrees Celsius. That is below the point of combustion. And that is the biggest difference between this heat stick and the combusted cigarette. So the way that it works is when this stick goes in, there is a blade inside that's going to heat the actual tobacco leaf that is in this product, but it is not going to combust. And I'm just showing a cutaway of this product here. There is actual tobacco in there, but it's a much less tobacco than you would find in the combusted cigarette because it's not going to burn, there's no fire, there's no smoke, there's no ash, okay? But what there is an aerosol. So what I'm showing here in this image, it's a very useful thing. On the left, we've pulled the smoke from a cigarette through a filter, okay? And we've caught things like high toxicant levels and carbon particles. On the right, we did the same thing, but it's with the aerosol from the IQOS device. And you can see visually it's very different, right? But what's really important is the identity of the things that we caught. So what I'm showing you here is the level of what we call harmful or potentially harmful constituents, or HPHCs. Just means chemicals that are toxins. And what we find with the aerosol from the IQOS versus a combusted cigarette is you get between a 93 and 97% reduction in carcinogens. You get a 93% reduction in cardiovascular toxicants and a 92% reduction in respiratory toxicants. So this is fantastic. We're seeing that in what's coming out of this device, almost 95% on average reduction in harmful toxins. I think that's a really useful number because it's 1 in 20, right? So really you could use 1 combusted cigarette or 20 of these heat sticks and it's about the same. But we know that that's not how people are going to use this product. So this product is all over the world, and we've done a lot of clinical studies on this. And we followed people over time. And what I'm showing here is their nicotine level. So the bottom line on the left there, that's people who quit. So they don't have nicotine in their system anymore. But the top line is cigarettes, and the blue line is IQOS. What you'll see is when we measure nicotine in their bodies through biomarkers, we find that they're about the same. And this is really important because the product delivers enough nicotine that people will actually be able to switch away from their combusted product, okay? And then if we look at use, we see that people end up using about the same number of sticks as they were using combusted cigarettes before. They're just getting 95% less of the harmful stuff. We don't just test this in the aerosol, we also test for it in people who use the product. So this is an example of carbon monoxide. If you ever want to check if someone is a smoker secretly, check their carbon monoxide levels. In the aerosol, you have about a 98, 99% reduction in carbon monoxide compared to the cigarette. And on the right, you'll see that the people who switch to IQOS are indistinguishable from the people who quit altogether. In fact, the FDA made us remove a carbon monoxide warning because it was no longer true that carbon monoxide came from this product. But we don't only want to think about people who are using the product. You know, we always want to think about the environment and people who are in the environment of someone using the product. We looked at this too. So what we did is we had model clean rooms, right? And so we would use a cigarette in one of these rooms. We would model homes, restaurants, offices, and then we would have someone use a cigarette, we would collect the air and test it. In a different clean room, we would have someone use the IQOS, collect the air and test it. And on the left, you're seeing what we could find in IQOS. Very, very little. On the right, the cigarette. So it's about 20 to 100 times more environmental toxins coming from a cigarette than are coming from the IQOS device. I should note this is on a log scale because I'm a nerd, but also because it makes it much easier to show these huge differences between the products when it comes to exposure secondhand. So we've been on the market, I mentioned, in Japan for over a decade now. And so it's our most mature market. So we can really start to see changes happening at the population and market level. So what I'm showing here is sales of tobacco in Japan. And on the top, I'm showing all tobacco. But you can see that middle line starts to fall at a steeper rate around 2015. And on the bottom, you can see something happens in 2015. That is when we started selling the IQOS product in Japan. And you can see that they're almost mirror images of each other. So as the number of cigarettes sold in Japan is falling, the number of HTP is going up. This work has been verified by academics who have determined that this change was due to the presence of IQOS and other heat-not-burn products. And the reason it's so successful is this is data from Japan as well, and it shows that of people who were smokers and started using IQOS, 72% of them no longer smoke cigarettes. This is an incredible conversion rate. The only thing I can think of to compare it to is when we think about the traditional nicotine replacement therapy, the drug side, or nicotine lozenges. Those work maybe 5 to 8% of the time. And when we have 30 million smokers, 5 to 8% is a lot. So I'm not saying that they're worthless, but this is a huge conversion rate that's moving people over. So when the FDA looked at this, they determined that our product was A, appropriate for the protection of public health, and also that it was a modified risk tobacco product. That is that it is in the best interest of the public health for this product to be on the market and for us to inform people who smoke that switching from smoking to IQOS reduces their exposure to harmful toxicants. And I just wanted to go through a couple of the other things that the agency said. Combustion does not occur. Fundamental difference between this and the traditional combusted cigarette. Cigarette smokers who switch reduce toxic exposure, likely to lead to less risk of tobacco-related diseases. It delivers enough nicotine that it will actually switch people over. It indicates that non-tobacco users would not be likely to start using IQOS, including youth. And it's expected to benefit the population as a whole, taking into account both users of tobacco products and persons who do not use tobacco products. Now, all of this is great, right? We have a product with a much lower risk profile, but it's going to deliver nicotine so it can actually switch people over. And this is great for people who smoke. But we also want to keep a key eye on underage consumers and to make sure that they don't become consumers of this product. And data from Japan, where we've been very successful, shows that underage use of the product there is well below 1%. It has not been picked up by youth there. And on the right, I'm showing the National Youth Tobacco Survey. It's shown that tobacco use overall in the United States by youth has dropped almost 60% in the last few years. Now, this product itself, I used to be a smoker. I am no longer a smoker. I do not use this product because it tastes like a cigarette. And that is one of the reasons that it's been so successful in getting people who smoke combusted cigarettes over. And it also is not a product that youth tend to be interested in. So I would like to thank you all, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Dr. Urkala. Vice Chair Considine, if you may, I would walk through the sections of the bill. Eddie Ablisser for the record. An overview of Assembly Bill 536. Section 1 simply adds heated and burned tobacco to the definition of cigarettes. It's an important distinction. When you look at the heats, it is a cigarette. It's just smaller amount of tobacco. It's rolled just as it's defined, and we wanted to add heated and burned as the two functions. Section 2 stipulates that heat not burned cigarettes cannot be sold in vending machines, and closes sort of that loophole on vending machine sales. Section 3 differentiates that heat not burned tobacco is not considered a vapor product, And then Section 4 finally gets to sort of the meat of the tax rate, that it says if a cigarette is intended to be heated, not burned, and if the FDA authorizes as a modified risk tobacco product and there's a less than 5% youth use post-market survey, then the product is subject to the reduced differentiated tax rate. And that's the gist of the bill, the entire bill. We do have a couple amendments that we've contemplated. That's the overview.
And Vice Chair, if I may, Shea Backus for the record, I do want to add, in addition to the work that's going into an amendment, we will also address one thing that was inadvertently omitted from the bill is where the revenue will go to eventually. And so that will be something else we will include into an amendment. I anticipate it will follow along with our cigarette revenue. Obviously, it will be parallel to that, but that's something we will also address and include in any amendment.
Great, thank you. Committee members, do we have questions? I'd like to ask the first question now. So what's the tax burden on a pack of your product or a pack of IQOS under the other tobacco product tax here?
Madam Chair, James Curry for the record. If we were to go under the other tobacco product tax rate, I think the conversion is about $1.50 a pack of heats. Right now, under the existing law, it's $1.80 a pack for cigarettes, and the proposal here would put us at 90 cents a pack differential. And we think it's important that these are cigarettes. They're defined, federally defined for federal excise tax purposes, and for states' MSA compliance. This is under state statute a tobacco rolled in paper cigarette.
Thank you. Our next question is from Assemblymember De Silva.
Thank you, Vice Chair. Just a quick question, just to clarify. So this is essentially a new product. It's not a vape. It's not a cigarette. It's a new sort of classification. And that's why you're asking also for the new sort of place now within the taxation system. Is that correct?
Correct. It's a new product in the States. James Curry, for the record. And what we're looking to do is create an incentive for people to make the switch. I mean, they have to buy the device itself, and people, to have a financial incentive to make that switch. The tobacco excise tax, like I said, is built into the price of the product, and so consumers don't see what that is. And we think it's important to tax proportionate based to the risk of the product.
Thank you. Our next question is from Assemblymember Goulding.
Thank you. I'm not sure if I might be missing this in here, but the thing that's really captivating that you said was tobacco tax should be proportionate to the product risk. This is only applying to this one product though, right? A non-burning tobacco product, is that correct?
Madam Chair, James Curry for the record. This would apply to the category of heated tobacco products, heated cigarettes. So we are one company among several who sell these products around the world. So it's not specific to IQOS, it's specific to a heated cigarette.
Would the sponsor consider adding other non-combustible tobacco products if the concept is that tobacco tax should be proportionate to the product risk? It seems like there's a suite of products that also fall into that chart that you gave us. And this is one, but a fair risk assessment would be more encompassing. Is that a possibility that the...
Eddie Abelser for the record. Assemblymember, I think the distinction we're making, and I think the question you're drawing to is the variety of products that fall underneath the other tobacco product designation. And I think there's a distinction that needs to be made that this product was designed purely for cigarette smokers. This is not intended to be sold to any new users. It's intended for a cigarette smoker to move and transition off of smoking a combustible cigarette. And the design of this mimics that behavior. And so as a result, it is a cigarette that has that enormous risk cliff that can reduce the harm to the user. Unlike the variety of products under OTP, which I believe has been contemplated multiple times by the legislature, those products are intended to draw in new users, are intended to create market share and compete. And there's a variety of products that I'm sure you're all familiar with. This is not intended to be into that type of design. I don't know if you want to add to that.
Follow-up? Is there any research, and I can't remember, I know that you said there was a bullet point on one of your slides that said that minors or youth were not inclined to use this, but I'm going to push back a little on that and like show me the data. Because there's two things you're saying that I'm questioning the data that how compelling these are. One is that youth aren't going to use them, and two, that this isn't a product that will invite new users to tobacco use. I have a hard time believing both of those.
Yeah, Brian Urkela, for the record. You know, we have this product, we have about 30 million users around the world, and 20 million of those have switched over completely. But that also means that we have experience in a lot of different countries. And the numbers I showed for Japan, where we were well below 1%, that holds true in countries throughout Europe and throughout Asia. So we don't see youth picking this up in any appreciable numbers around the world. We also use a model where, you know, to get the device, it's not just something you pick up off the shelf and you start using. You know, we say, are you over 21? Of course, we check identification. And are you a smoker? And that's what you have to do to be able to get our product. We have no interest in selling the product to someone who is not a smoker.
And Eddie Albus, for the record, I just want to piggyback on what Dr. Urkela said. The products are sold in not a general location, widespread convenience markets. They're sold in a boutique store, an IQOS store. If you see the stores in every country, it's IQOS. It's very simple. It's very protected and safe. And in order to, I believe, enter those stores, you have to answer those questions. The design of the sale of the product is just as thoughtful as the intent to move the cigarette smoker onto something that's a modified risk.
Thank you. Our next question is from Assemblymember O'Neill.
And Chair, if I may have a lay a foundation and build up on a question, if I may. You made a statement about your selling IQOS in multiple countries around the world. Why have you had, and you said you've had the same success that you've had in Japan on reduction in people going from smoking cigarettes to using IQOS. Did I understand that correctly?
In other countries, we see similar conversion rates. Japan is our highest conversion rate, but it's just kind of the more mature market. People are more accustomed to the product there.
Would you please state your name for the record?
Brian Urkela, for the record.
What are some of the, if I may, what are some of the other countries, and what country would be number 2? I'd like to compare. You said Japan was the best in results. What are some of the others, and who would fall into the number 2 spot?
Brian Urkela, for the record, who's a scientist and not a marketing person, so he's not super at this. But I know that we have had great success in Japan, as well as these other heat-not-burn products are popular in Japan, South Korea. Italy does quite well. Those are the ones off the top of my head, but I don't have those numbers in front of me.
Would you be able to get them to me, or actually get them to the chair? I would appreciate that.
Of course.
And then one last question, I promise, I think. What other, you said there are other products similar to IQOS being sold around the world. Can you give me just a summation of how many or what these others are? What differentiates you from them?
Assemblymember James Curry, for the record. We do know that our competitors offer products named Plume or Glow, and similarly, they have a heating device and a heat stick inserted into it. Different design devices, but all doing the exact same thing, warming the tobacco to a point below combustion.
I appreciate that. So if they came to the States, they'd be under this statute also. I appreciate that, and I know we had a short meeting. If you'd stop by another time, my other questions will take offline. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Our next question is from Assemblymember Hafen.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you guys for being here. And I understand the conversation on the risk cliff of non-combustibles, but I'm just curious why the new proposal for a new tax structure rather than just trying to categorize this as other tobacco product.
Assemblymember James Curry for the record. You'll notice on the pack of heats, this is stamped for federal excise tax classification of 20 Class A cigarettes. These are a cigarette under the definition of Nevada tobacco tax law as well. They are tobacco rolled in paper. It gets complicated when you get into OTP and wanting to include other products in the conversation. We were focused on this class of products and working within the structure of the tax law that already exists. So we believe the appropriate, differential is under the 50% of what's taxed on cigarettes currently. And we think that's significant enough to get people to convert from combustible cigarettes to heated cigarettes.
Okay, our next question is from Assemblymember Gallant.
Thank you. So I wanted to go to the goal of this is to get people off of cigarettes. Is there a goal to get them off of these, sorry, what's it called again? I apologize. IQOS. Is there a goal for people to get off of IQOS? And if so, are you seeing that in other countries?
Assemblymember James Curry for the record. The company has a vision of a smoke-free future. And I think this product and some of the others that we currently sell in the States, including oral nicotine pouches, all fit into the most important and pressing public health need, which is to convert people off by far the riskiest and most harmful form of tobacco and nicotine consumption onto a better path without introducing new users and without introducing youth to the product. So that's certainly a conversation we can have at some point, but we are looking to convert existing cigarette smokers in the U.S. onto a lower harm product.
And Eddie Ablis for the record, if I may, Assemblymember, the other concept and what makes Nevada, I think, an attractive state to take something like this is, our entertainment venues and the fact that we have an opportunity to incentivize, right? Rather than doing prohibitions or restrictions, right? We can incentivize the opportunity for many of our gaming facilities to create an environment where the secondhand smoke is almost nil. And I think what a great proposition to the state of Nevada.
Follow up? Okay, so I'm curious, maybe Mr. Nakamoto can answer this question. I'm going to put you on the spot if that's okay. How much do we tax like Nicorette and gums that are trying to get people off of nicotine? Because my 13-year-old, let's see, my husband stopped smoking cigarettes 13 years ago when we had Xander, and he's still doing the Nicorettes. Right.
Thank you, Madam Vice Chair. Michael Nakamoto with the Fiscal Analysis Division for the record. I will let the Department of Taxation correct me if I am incorrect. But that kind of device, Nicorette, is something that is, to my knowledge, regulated by the Food and Drug Administration and is therefore exempt from the other tobacco products tax under NRS 370.008. I'm getting a nod from the Executive Director, so I actually did not mess this one up this time.
Thank you. I do have a couple of questions. The first one is IQOS or any of these type of products being sold in the States right now?
Assemblymember James Curry for the record. Just as of this last month, the product is being launched in the state of Texas, and there are plans around other parts of the country to introduce in markets as the months and years go ahead.
Thank you. And in Texas or in any other states, are there any that tax cigarettes consisting of tobacco that is heated but not burned already? Like, is that structure created already?
Assemblymember James Curry for the record. The tobacco tax structure in every state is a little bit different, but where these are being commercialized, they are treated as the product that they are, a harm reduction product that ought to be taxed at a lower rate and are taxed at a lower rate.
Committee members, are there any other questions? If not, I do have one more. So in explaining the product and talking about that there are stores in Japan that you have to go into the store to get it, are you visualizing like stores in each hotel or all around town? Or if you could give me sort of the landscape on that.
Yeah. Thank you, Chair Considine. Eddie Apples for the record. Over the past couple of years, we've had some phenomenal conversations with primarily our gaming facilities about the opportunity to create these boutique shops, right? You don't need a lot of space. You could provide such value to the consumer that's in the facility and create a relationship. We've explored doing even initial air quality studies in the casino to show the value it might bring. So we've got a lot of great partnerships just talking about it. Obviously, the first hurdle is, could we bring it to market, make it a consumer accessible product? And that's where the tax structure comes in. But I believe it is the intent of Philip Morris International to create the same theme in how the product is delivered to consumers and really create protections around that. Because, let me just add, the protections are so essential to that FDA authorization. If any one of those guardrails falls, the product is taken off the shelves immediately because of the FDA authorization that's been in place.
Right, thank you. If we don't have any other questions, thank you for the presentation. We will now move on to testimony, and we will begin testimony in support here in Carson City. And please begin when you're ready.
Thank you, Madam Vice Chair, members of the committee. My name is Tom Clark. That's T-O-M-C-L-A-R-K. I'm here on behalf of the Reno Sparks Chamber of Commerce. And, the Chamber, of course, is not going to support a product that just is going to get others to start smoking. But we are going to support those products that for those people that choose to smoke, those people that are addicted to smoking, if they have a different tool, something that's as innovative as what has been presented to you, and there's an encouragement to do so because it's a little bit less, that's what we support. We especially like the fact that it reduces the amount of secondhand smoke in a lot of the environments that our members have, whether it be a casino or other place. So people are going to smoke, and we hope that they stop. And if they're not going to stop, we hope they use a healthier alternative to that. Healthier being, of course, in air quotes. But if they're going to do so, if they can use an innovative product like this, we totally support that, and we totally support this legislation. Thank you, Madam Vice Chair.
Thank you. Seeing no one else here in Carson City stepping up to the table in support of AB 536, and seeing no one in Las Vegas, AVH, is there anyone on the line wishing to testify in support of AB 536?
Chair, the public lines are open and working, but we have no callers to testify in support at this time.
Thank you. We will now move on to opposition. Is there anyone here in Carson City wishing to testify in opposition to AB 536? Please begin when you're ready. You have up to 2 minutes.
Hi, Jennifer Pearson. I am here in my personal capacity right now, but I just want to reiterate that I am an expert in tobacco control. I have several $1 million in funding from the National Institutes of Health on this. I was an author on the Surgeon General's report on e-cigarettes, deputy editor of an international journal on nicotine tobacco research called Nicotine Tobacco Research. So I am here to be kind of a neutral interpreter of the science, and I have to say, you've heard me speak already. I am open to the idea of a continuum of harm, and I do believe that e-cigarettes are less harmful than cigarettes. I do not think the science is ready for us to say that IQOS is like e-cigarettes. And I also want you to understand that FDA has two different types of marketing allowances. It has what's called a reduced harm marketing allowance, and then it also has a reduced exposure marketing allowance. So the reduced exposure marketing allowance means you're going to get less harmful chemicals if you use this product. The reduced risk says you're actually going to have less risk of harm or disease. And this product received the reduced exposure marketing allowance, but not the reduced harm marketing allowance. So specifically on FDA's kind of decision making this marketing allowance, on page 8 it states, with respect to the risk modification order request, the applicant has not demonstrated that as actually used by consumers, the products sold or distributed with the proposed modified risk information will significantly reduce harm and the risk of tobacco-related disease to the individual users and benefit the health of the population as a whole, taking into account both users of tobacco products and persons who do not currently use tobacco products. Science has then shown that IQOS might or might not contain less harmful chemicals. So the stuff that you saw today was all from PMI, which, you know, could be good science, but we really need to have reproduction independent of the company itself. There's a recent review that came out that found that, an independent review that found that PMI studies overall showed reduced toxicity and health risks of IQOS compared to cigarettes, but independent data did not always conform with this conclusion.
Professor Pearson, it's been 2 minutes. If you could please quickly wrap up.
Yep, done. Happy to answer other questions independently if you would like. Thank you.
Chair and members of the committee, my name is Serena Kasama, and I am here on behalf of Altria today to express opposition to AB 536. This bill will give a 50% tax reduction and thereby a competitive advantage to one product made by one company that is only sold in the test market of Austin, Texas, not in Nevada. This proposal is both premature and very narrow in scope. Reduced harm taxation should apply to all reduced harm products. For example, Altria's heated tobacco product SWIC, which has not yet been introduced in the U.S. market, would not qualify for the proposed tax reduction because it uses a capsule format instead of rolled tobacco. SWIC would be taxed at the current tobacco rate of 30% of the wholesale price, which puts it at a tax disadvantage and would make it less competitive. AB 536 also doesn't consider taxation of existing smoke-free and smokeless products like dip, e-vapor, or nicotine pouches. Currently, heated tobacco cigarettes are only available in one test market and are not listed on Nevada's tobacco directory under the Master Settlement Agreement, or MSA. As the Food and Drug Administration has yet to authorize more reduced harm heated tobacco products, Nevada should avoid giving one reduced harm product a competitive advantage over others prematurely. Additionally, Nevada may need new tax stamps for this product, which is smaller than a combustible cigarette pack and will not fit in existing stamping machines. Stamping is needed for all cigarettes based on Nevada law. This would create administrative burdens for the state and wholesalers while reducing the stamping allowance, which is tied to tax rate. The company advocating for this proposal will be a non-participating manufacturer, or NPM, to the MSA. Therefore, AB 536 would provide a 50% tax reduction to one heated tobacco product favoring an NPM over an MSA participating manufacturer. Participating manufacturers make MSA annual payments to the states in perpetuity, including roughly $40 million to Nevada, while non-participating manufacturers pay into escrow accounts that's managed by PwC. That money never comes back to the state, and the dollars are returned to NPM after 25 years. So in closing, Nevada legislators should wait for the FDA to establish a broader market for reduced harm products and engage all stakeholders to develop a fair and comprehensive tax modernization plan that treats all products equitably. Thank you for your attention.
Good evening, Vice Chair Considine, members of the committee. Peter Kruger with I3 Public Affairs. I'm here in opposition of Assembly Bill 536. As has been testified to already, I want to skip to the portion that we feel, that I personally feel, is of concern to us in Nevada, and that's, should this bill pass, there is a likely loss of revenue to the state, which right now is really impossible to calculate because we have no product sold or any history to base that on. But I think based on, we could make some assumptions based on the Department of Taxation's numbers. And just to give you a little background, the department reported in FY 2024 revenue from cigarettes, not OTP and cigarettes, just cigarettes, was approximately $131 million. And assuming that heated tobacco products achieve a 10% market share, and that's a number that Philip Morris International has publicly said was their goal, this would equal about $13.1 million in revenue. The bill proposes taxing, which is heat not burned, products at, as you've heard, 90 cents a pack versus the $1.80 that's for combustible cigarettes. So therefore, based on a 10% market share, this would show a potential loss to the state of $6.5 million. So it's my belief that this Assembly Bill 536 picks winners and losers by creating a unique system to tax a product that is narrow in scope, has significant monetary implications for the state, and therefore I urge you not to process this bill. Thank you.
Good evening, ma'am. Brian Wachter, BRYANWACHTER, Senior Vice President of the Retail Association of Nevada. We are opposed to the bill from a revenue tax standpoint. The new process with the FDA to get these types of products to market is going to necessitate that every company who wants to do this has to start meeting those cessation requirements, both making sure that there's no harm to children and that there's a reduction to smoking in adult smoking. And so it's not going to be new or unique to the particular products that are coming out. There are no guidelines, however, on what those products have to do. So the ones in front of us today are heated, not burned. We could have an unlimited number of new widgets that are coming out approved by the FDA that in some way reduce cessation, reduce harm to children, but are still going to come out. And what we're worried about is steps like this are going to require NRS to kind of be inundated and dotted with these little one-off things to deal with the particular mechanics or chemical combustion or whatever it is of these new products that are coming on. And so we would recommend that we need to have kind of a larger conversation about all of these products, where they're going, the ones that we currently have. You heard a couple of bills today on how we're going about this. And so this piecemeal project or the way we're going about it is going to lead, we think, to a negative consequence on the state budget, as well as confusion for small retailers. And for that reason, we oppose the bill.
Thank you, Bradley Mayer. For the record, on behalf of Southern Nevada Health District, I just want to start and say that I do appreciate Eddie, who you heard from, engaging this group. It's tough for him to come engage a bunch of tobacco advocates, and so it is appreciated that he had that conversation, and I acknowledge that. However, we are opposed to this bill today based on the definition change that would give this product favorable tax treatment versus other products. We know that in tobacco, the more you increase the price, the less usage you see, and there's a very strong correlation to that. And so lowering the price of any tobacco product such as this could roll back the decades-long effort to prevent the smoking initiation in the first place. We certainly don't want to encourage somebody not smoking to begin starting because the price was lowered. And so we also just want to mention too that the resulting loss in potential revenue to the state of Nevada, the prevention efforts in the state are underfunded or sometimes not funded. And we've had the prevention money cut a couple times into public health. And so we know that a very proven and effective method of reducing smoking and ultimately exposure to secondhand smoke is through these prevention and cessation efforts. And we would hope that we would find the ability to fund those as well. I think more longitudinal research is needed to truly understand what the long-term effects of a new product like this would be. Thank you for your time.
Good evening, committee. For the record, my name is Joelle Gutman-Dodson with Northern Nevada Public Health, here in opposition of this bill this evening. And I also wanted to express my
Thanks to Mr. Alvazar and his team. He did engage us early and often in this bill, but we are still here in opposition today. Tobacco prevention advocates philosophically disagree that an emerging product should be taxed at a 50% discount of what cigarettes are taxed at. And even though this is being marketed as a harm reduction product, there is still harm in ingesting any sort of nicotine or tobacco and a risk of becoming addicted to these products. So like Bradley said, we believe that any tax revenue collected from this product at the full rate of a cigarette or under OTP, whichever way you would prefer, some of that money should be invested in prevention and education efforts to reduce harm and protect vulnerable populations, prioritizing long-term health over short-term market expansion, which is essential to Nevada's well-being. Thank you.
Thank you. Seeing no one else in Carson City wishing to testify in opposition to AB 536, and seeing no one in Las Vegas, AVH will go to you for anyone wishing to testify in opposition to 536.
Chair, the public lines are open and working, but we have no callers to testify in opposition at this time.
Thank you. We will then move to neutral. Is there anyone here in Carson City wishing to testify in neutral on AB 536? Please go ahead when you're ready.
Good evening, Vice Chair Considine, members of the committee. Michael Morton with the Office of the Attorney General. The Attorney General's office is here in neutral today. Just to state on the record that we are currently working with the bill sponsors and their stakeholders for, if the committee decides to make whatever policy decision, that any definitions or taxing structure adhere to the master settlement agreement and the Attorney General's enforcement authority for tobacco and the master settlement agreement. Thank you.
Good evening, Vice Chair and members of the committee. For the record, Miranda Hoover with 3C House, representing the Energy and Convenience Association of Nevada. We have members on both sides of this issue. However, we want to simply thank the sponsor as well as all of our members for engaging in conversations. We really appreciate that, and we know there will be continued conversations. So we look forward to getting to a space where hopefully we can all be on the same page. So thanks.
Thank you. Seeing no one else in Carson City wishing to testify in neutral, and still seeing no one in Las Vegas, AVH, is there anyone on the lines wishing to testify in neutral on AB 536?
Chair, the public lines are open and working, but we have no callers for neutral.
Thank you. Would the presenters like to make any final remarks?
Thank you, Madam Vice Chair and Committee on Revenue, Shay Backus, for the record. I just wanted to highlight there have been a few letters in support that have been posted to Nellis, and I'm going to go ahead and turn it back over to our folks from Philip Morris to address the comment regarding the FDA approval and just clarify what had transpired.
Thank you. Brian Urkla for the record. So when the FDA looked at these 2 million pages, there are two types of modified risk tobacco products. So the first thing they had to do was called a pre-market tobacco application. There's a PMTA. After reading that and evaluating the science, the agency determined that the product was appropriate for the protection of public health. Now, when it comes to the MRTP, as I said, there's two kinds. There is a harm reduction order, which is called a G1, and an exposure reduction order, which is called a G2. So being a novel product, the agency did not see sort of the decades of epidemiological data that we see with other products, so they went with the G2 claim. But I want to tell you a little bit more about what that G2 exposure claim is, and I'm sorry I have it in front of me because I have not memorized the language. But in order to have that claim authorized, it would first have to be appropriate to promote the public health, that there would have to be a substantial reduction in harmful compounds, and that the scientific evidence not available and using the best methods cannot be made without conducting long-term epidemiological studies, they still believe that there would be a measurable and substantial reduction in morbidity and mortality among users of the product. So they're saying without these decades of data, we still think that that low chemistry profile is going to reduce the risk of tobacco-related disease. As for confirmational studies, we love those. We did submit the data to FDA. They found it to be rigorous. They asked us a lot of questions about it, but they also did their own work. So they contracted Southern Research Laboratory, which is one of their partners, to confirm the levels of compounds in the IQOS aerosol compared to the smoke. And what they say in the review is that the Southern Research Laboratory found very, very similar results. So thank you.
Thank you, Madam Vice Chair. For the record, James Curry. I want to address a couple of points that were brought up. Number one, on the MSA and tax stamp issue. PMI is a non-participating manufacturer, and so we do and will pay into the escrow. We are doing this in other states. We will figure out how to do that in Nevada if we decide to come here. And we will figure out how to stamp the pack. That is not going to be a problem. We are committed to doing that. But I would point out further that as a non-participating manufacturer in the MSA, we have requirements under the FDA's MRTP that go far beyond anything that the Master Settlement Agreement requires of manufacturers. These include review of all marketing, advertising, promotional materials specific to each product, detailed action plans to restrict underage access to the product and limit exposure to unintended audiences, information on the use of partners, influencers, bloggers. The list goes on beyond the requirements of the MSA, and we're proud to do that. And if we don't, we would lose that FDA authorization and the product would be off the market. And then finally, from my standpoint, the mention of a capsulated product, SWIC, from one of our competitors, I would point out first and foremost, it is not a cigarette. So it is in a different category. It's also not subject to federal excise tax as the heated cigarettes and conventional combustible cigarettes are. And so they would be seeking an additional discount when they can easily fit under the OTP category here in Nevada. And so happy to answer any questions beyond that. Thank you.
And then, Madam Vice Chair, one final closing comment. In response to many of my friends that came up in opposition, I just want to sort of highlight this concept of loss of revenue and how it's being evaluated from an opposition perspective. The idea that, I mean, just wrap your mind around, if we remove 70% of all current cigarette smokers, combustible, fire at the end of their fingertips smokers, and move them onto a product that reduces the harm by 99%, and we're losing, in rough assumptions, maybe 6 million, maybe less or more in revenue. But isn't that transition, that net total of change, of individuals smoking cigarettes, smoking these dangerous products onto something that has significantly reduced harm to themselves and the public and the secondhand smoke efforts as well, isn't that worth it? And I contend that I believe that's a great policy decision, is absolutely worth it. There are ways that we can continue prevention programs with the dollars it had, but we're removing 70% of users. That's phenomenal. And that's if it's successful, right? And maybe higher. But I ask, please consider the policy of incentivizing the use of this harm reduction product. And let's not wait. Let's not wait for the other companies to get their product through the process and then open it up. Because all that does is harm the current smoker that wants a product like this, that would like to purchase it today in Nevada. Thank you.
Great, thank you. And I will now close the hearing on AB 536 and take a 1-minute recess.
I'll go ahead and call our meeting back to order. We'll go ahead, first of all and foremost, thank you, Vice Chair, for stepping in while we did Assembly Bill 536. We'll go ahead and open the hearing on Assembly Bill 471 and welcome Assembly Member Hibbets to the dais and any of his guests, and feel free to start when you all are ready.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Committee. Brian Hibbets, Assembly District 13 for the record. I've gotten a lot of questions about this bill as to what it actually does, mostly from people on this committee. So let me tell you what it does. For those of you that were here 2 years ago, you'll remember Assembly Bill 232. For those of you that were not here, I'll explain it to you. What Assembly Bill 232 did was cap the tax on premium cigars at 50 cents instead of the standard 30% of OTP. And a lot of that had to do with the fact that our brick and mortar stores in the state were suffering and were not able to compete with internet retailers who were not paying the tax at all. What this bill does is help to remedy that. This bill is, let me back up. In 2019, there was a bill, I believe, and don't quote me on this one because I don't have it sitting in front of me, I believe it was SB 81, that was brought in an effort to remedy that in 2019. However, the online retail community was misclassified as wholesalers, and there was no path for them to pay the OTP tax. What this bill does is reclassify them as retailers, a remote retail seller, and gives them a pathway to pay the tax that they should have been paying this entire time, and also marries that to the OTP tax paid by our brick and mortar stores. So it brings parity between the two competing industries. And the really fun part about this is it was requested by the online retailers. They want to do this. They know that it is their responsibility, and they just simply want to do it in a legal manner. And you should have an amendment in front of you. I hope everybody has the amendment. It was submitted this morning, and it looks something like this. It is, I apologize for the lateness of it. I was working with taxation to do some technical adjustments to the bill, and what the amendment changes is some technical things that taxation wanted, and then also the effective date is moved to January 1st of 2026. Because that's when the licensing is done for retail establishments, is on the calendar year, and we didn't see any reason to have a 6 or 3 month license and then have to have retailers then reapply for a year-long license. And it also makes things easier on the Department of Taxation because they don't have to go through the process themselves. So I would like to turn it over to my co-presenter, Beth Oliva, well, I'll let her tell you who she is.
Thank you so much, Assemblymember Hibbets, and good evening to Chair Backus and the committee. Thank you for allowing us present tonight. As he mentioned, my name is Beth Oliva, for the record, O-L-I-V-A. And I am outside counsel to both the Cigar Association of America and the Premium Cigar Coalition. The Cigar Association of America is the largest group of manufacturers, distributors, suppliers to the cigar industry in the country. And the Premium Cigar Coalition is a group of the largest online retailers of cigars and pipe tobacco. So, as the Assemblyman referred to, we're here today in support of this bill. It's a long history here, and I also really want to thank Assemblymember Hibbets for his leadership here, and particularly also Executive Director Hughes and her team for the work they've put in with us for 4 years now. And we come to you today with an amendment that I think is really strong and addresses hopefully all of their concerns and our concerns to get this path to compliance in place. So a little bit of background of how we got here, because I think that I've always say past is prologue, and it helps set the stage for what is sort of an arcane tax point. You all may recall in 2018 that the Supreme Court ruled in the Wayfair decision that states could tax, for sales tax purposes, online transactions, no matter where it was coming from, as long as there were economic thresholds, right? That made it constitutional versus if you only sat in Nevada and needed, let's say that, economic nexus here for people who are located here. What that did do is make sure that all online retailers are only going to be subject to taxes in the states where they have that economic nexus. So what we started to see was that states were looking at this not only for sales tax, but to tobacco excise taxes. And if any of you are familiar with the Supreme Court's decision in Wayfair, you know, one of the main things they looked at was the burden on retailers of how complicated a 50-state sales tax system was. If you look at tobacco excise taxes, as we've heard in the prior testimonies, you multiply that by 1,000 because every state is different, every state does it differently. So what we did as a group was look at all 50 state statutes to see, and in all of them there was some problem. All of them had different problems. Nevada's had different problems from Illinois versus Wisconsin. We came up with a model legislation to try to bring the tools together, right, to put these economic thresholds in place to make this constitutional, but also to establish certain things that needed to happen. One was a path to licensure. Most states did not have a licensure definition that would capture this group of companies. Also the tax base, we're talking about a very different transaction, and also the authority to collect the tax to make sure that it brought this group into the tax system and only brought them in once, so there wasn't any concern from the department or the companies of who they're supposed to be taxing, when and how, right? And so we've come up with this solution. We went to the Federation of Tax Administrators with it. Their uniformity committee adopted it, and we've been going around the country. We've had it in 9 states so far. I always look at my list because we're actually getting quite a large list of Colorado, Indiana, Maine, Maryland, Michigan, North Carolina, Virginia, and Wisconsin have passed and implemented this legislation, all in a pretty near uniform way, which was the way to help us and help departments of taxation so that Nevada's department can talk to Wisconsin's department or talk to Virginia's department of how it's worked. We also have a bill pending in Illinois this session as well to do the same thing here. So what we've been doing, we started this last session and have really been working again with Executive Director Hughes and her department to come up with a bill that made sense for Nevada, but also made sense for our retailers so that the department has all its audit powers. We're not changing anything that doesn't need to be changed, but also that our companies can comply. So looking at the specific difference here and why it's so challenging, you heard alluded to before, tobacco excise tax is imposed between a wholesaler and a retailer, and the wholesaler is usually the one who remits that tax to the department. They're usually based in the state, right? They're licensed in the state, and they do that. For our online retailers, they're mostly based in Pennsylvania and Florida, and they are selling into all 50 states. So that transaction isn't getting taxed at any one state level. What triggers the tax is when a Nevada consumer pushes buy on the website. And so now we're going to have to look backwards in time to be able to impose that tax on a transaction that could have happened years ago and on inventory of up to 60,000 SKUs. It makes things just a bit more complicated than the way the current statute's written. So one of the first things our bill does is to say that we're going to have the exact same tax rate. There's no change in the rate. It's just that so that there's an actually very easily auditable way for the department to verify the tax base. We're using what's called the actual cost, which is essentially the acquisition cost that the companies can track versus a wholesale cost, which is the basis now, which is much more based on your traditional products such as cigarettes, smokeless tobacco that are sold in convenience stores. They have a list of wholesale prices. In the premium cigar space, because it's really an artisanal product, you don't have that. The prices change every season, every year, based on the price of tobacco, based on global supply chain. I can tell you this past week, we had a fire at one of the major factories in Nicaragua. I guarantee prices are going to go up because of it, because inventory has been lost. And so it's a much more dynamic pricing system, and this is going to keep up with that so that the department can very easily audit off that actual acquisition price that the companies keep. So we wanted to make sure that was there. What we also create in this bill is the remote retail seller license, which is specifically for online sellers of cigars and pipe tobacco. We also have an amendment on the bill to clarify that for delivery sellers, which are a defined term under a federal statute called the PAC Act, for cigarettes, smokeless tobacco, and e-cigarettes that can't be sold online unless they comply with very, very onerous restrictions. Cigars and pipe tobacco are specifically excluded from that federal statute and are excluded from state statutes across the country. So what we did was make it very, very clear that they're the delivery sellers, but these online retail sellers of cigars and pipe tobacco who are federally legal to sell these products online, are doing it responsibly, can be licensed as the remote retail sellers. And what we did with that license is tie it to a couple things. One, the economic thresholds, right, to make sure it's constitutional. Also requiring if they hit those economic thresholds, they have to also register for sales tax, make sure you're getting both, right? And we're also requiring age verification right into the statute. I know we got a question about how that will interact with the in-state retailer certification that's being made on age verification, and we're happy to work with the Department of Taxation and the AG's office on whatever is easier for them. Our companies take age verification incredibly seriously. They will certify and fill out whatever forms are necessary to prove that they have the state-of-the-art technology here. Most of them moved to 21 long before it was federal law because they just have no tolerance for it. So we want to make sure all of that was in the license because it's incredibly important. So they have their own license category. The department can track them very easily and make sure they're doing everything right. So that's really what we're doing. And then we also, as I said, made sure that the department has that clear authority here and that tax would only be collected once. So once we put these tools in place, which this bill does, the amendment is the result of, I like to hope, some really good work between the department and us. They raised a really good idea to have it as a standalone section, so it's adding a new section 800, so it's very clear for them and for us what's required for this group. Again, it's not a new tax, it's just making sure that the tools are there to collect this tax. But we stand ready and willing to do whatever is necessary to implement. I know it sounds a bit like a trick when someone who represents tobacco companies said to you, we want to pay the tax and we're willing to do this, but I promise there's not a trick here. This is just that we need to have the right tools in place to make it so that the companies can actually comply and the department can actually audit and enforce. But I'm happy to answer any questions, and I really do thank you for the time and the opportunity to present.
Thank you, Chair. That concludes our presentation. We're happy to stand for questions. Brian Hibbets for the record, sorry.
Thank you so much for the presentation. Assembly members, do we have questions for the presenter on Assembly Bill 471? I'll start with Vice Chair Considine.
Thank you. My question is, are there any estimates of how many remote sales transaction Nevada residents make compared to those in physical retail stores?
Actual transactions, that's one I haven't gotten before. I don't know. I will say this to the point about the parity. I know that, again, it's hard because of the OTP tax to know, and it might be a better question for the department, but from engagement we've had, the retailers have said with the tax cap that they have had increased expenditures here in the state of Nevada because of the tax cap. Equalizing the tax so that the online retailers pay it as well will again get people to walk into their brick and mortar store versus buying online, because right now online is cheaper. They all pay the sales tax if they've hit the economic thresholds, but they don't have to charge that excise tax. So I don't know exactly how many transactions. I can probably try to find that information out from my group of how many transactions are coming in the state if you'd like to know. At brick and mortar, that's a much harder nut to crack because there are so many, and for them to give their individual sales, I don't have access to quite that level of data. But I can tell you, I can probably get an estimate on the number of transactions from the online group if it would be helpful to the committee. Okay.
And then I do have a question. Looking at the rate, last legislative session, as Assemblymember Hibbets had noted, AB 32 had provided a much lower tax on the wholesale product. Mainly the whole point was in competition with like online retailers. So, and coming into the market, looking at this structure I'm looking at the amendment, page 2 of 2, the proposed amendment, under the proposed change to NRS 370.800. It looks like the structure at lines 31 to 38 at the top of page 3, lines 1 to 2, are going to kind of maintain that lower tax structure. I believe originally the wholesaler tax was going to be 30% because it was under OTP. With respect to this structure, is this consistent around the United States? When you said you created a model, a model code to be implemented for ease of online compliance, are there other states that are a little higher, other states that are lower than this structure? Can you kind of like highlight some of the higher revenue streams and also some of the lower revenue streams. Thanks.
Absolutely. Beth Oliva for the record. So it's a great question. You know, every state, as I said, has a different tax rate and a different tax structure. When we created the model legislation, what we were trying to do was really look at the licensure, the tax base, meaning is it defined as manufacturer's list price or wholesale price? We're getting to an acquisition cost type pricing. And then again, the thresholds and the ability to tax. The actual tax rates and where there have been caps vary from state to state. I can tell you in Michigan, I believe there's a 36% tax rate, and there's a 50-cent cap there that had a similar, whether you call it a pilot period or a sunset like this one, that the state then extended 3 times and made final law. In Wisconsin, we've just implemented there's a 71% tax rate, but a 50% cap that's been in law for quite a long time. I will say in some of the other states we've implemented in, there isn't a cap. In Maryland, Virginia, there's not a cap. In North Carolina, I can tell you they have a lower tax rate than you do. I believe it's 12.5%. And yet a cap was imposed when we did this bill at that time at the request of the bill sponsor. So it does vary a bit. I would say that in terms of the tax rate, Nevada is about in the middle of the country on an OTP tax rate. We have rates up to, in neighboring Utah, it's at 86%, and New York is 75%, and some that, again, like North Carolina are at 12.5%. So you guys are kind of in that middle group in the 30% rate. Is that sort of what you were getting at?
That is, I appreciate that. Members, do we have any other questions for the presenters? Okay, with that, if you guys want to leave the podium, we can go ahead and start taking testimony in support of Assembly Bill 471. We'll start here in Carson City. So those wishing to give testimony in support of Assembly Bill 471, please make your way up to the dais.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee. My name is Tom Clark. I'm here again on behalf of the Reno-Sparks Chamber of Commerce. It's weird being lonely up here at the dais or at the table, but we're very much in support of this legislation. The legislation that Mr. Hibbets brought last legislative session has proven itself to be worthy and has been good for those retailers of cigars and tobacco products, pipe tobacco specifically, and so we very much support this legislation as well. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you so much. It doesn't appear that there's anyone in Las Vegas, so we'll go to the phone lines. AVH, do we have anyone on the phone lines wishing to give testimony in support of Assembly Bill 471?
Chair, the public lines are open and working, but we have no callers to testify in support at this time.
Thank you so much. Next, we will move on to testimony in opposition to Assembly Bill 471. We'll start here in Carson City. I don't see anyone making their way to the dais. No one's in Las Vegas. AVH, do we have any callers join the call?
Chair, we have no callers to testify in opposition at this time.
Lastly, we'll move to neutral testimony regarding Assembly Bill 471. We'll start here in Carson City. Is there anyone wishing to give testimony in the neutral? There's no one in Las Vegas. AVH, do we have any callers on the phone line to give testimony in the neutral?
Chair, we have no callers for neutral.
With that, we'll go ahead and invite the bill sponsor back to the dais to give some closing remarks.
Thank you, Chair. In the interest of dinner, I'd just like to say thank you.
Thank you. With that, we can go ahead and close the close the hearing on Assembly Bill 471. And we can go to our last item on our agenda, which is public comment. Anyone wishing to give public comment this evening in Carson City, please make your way to the dais. Doesn't look like we have anyone here or in Las Vegas. AVH, do we have anyone on the phone line this evening wishing to give public comment?
Chair, the public lines are open and working, but we have no callers for public comment.
With that, I can go ahead and close our meeting this evening.